The night is quiet, and yet within your chest there may be a storm. Perhaps you have laid your head down on the pillow, but the body feels restless. Thoughts drift through like dark clouds across a silver sky, and sleep feels distant as if it belongs to another world. Maybe today was heavy with worries, with conversations that echoed in your mind long after they ended, with tasks unfinished, with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of tomorrow pressing against your heart. Perhaps as you listen now, your eyes are moist, touched by a silent sorrow that has no words. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out. Let the shoulders soften, let the jaw unclench, let the space around you cradle you, as though it were a gentle cocoon of safety. Here, you do not need to accomplish anything. You do not need to prove yourself. You do not need to try. You are already enough. You are already whole. Before we begin our journey together, I would like to invite you into a small gesture of connection. If this message resonates with you, if you feel some comfort in this space, you may choose to gently like this video or even subscribe to receive more stories told in this spirit. And if you feel called, you could share in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. Imagine a circle of listeners around the world, each lying in their own beds, breathing together, carried by the same stream of story and silence. This community is woven like a net of stars, and you are part of it. Now let us drift back, not only in time, but into the heart of a story that has been told and retold in many ways. It begins with a monk named Chen, though his name is not the essence. His journey could be yours or mine, or anyone's who has ever struggled with the longing to find peace. Chen came to the monastery as a young man full of fire. His eyes shone with the dream of enlightenment, that mysterious light spoken of in sutras and whispered through the stories of ancient masters. He believed with the innocence of youth that if he tried hard enough, if he sat long enough, if he recited the words correctly and held his body still as a statue, he would surely arrive at the shore of awakening. In those early days, the monastery seemed like a sacred fortress of certainty. The stone walls glowed golden in the morning sun. The bells rang with solemn beauty. The elder monks moved with quiet dignity. Chen told himself, "If I dedicate my life to this practice, if I sacrifice sleep, comfort and ease, I will reach the truth." His conviction was unwavering. He rose before dawn, his feet touching the cold floor as the stars were still fading into the sky. He folded his legs into the lotus posture and sat for hours. He counted his breaths with perfect discipline, as though counting could purchase his freedom. But the harder he tried, the further away peace seemed to be. His back ached. His mind was like a wild horse that no rope could hold. The more he forced his thoughts to still, the louder they roared. The more he tried to seize presence, the more it slipped through his fingers. And so, even in the silence of the meditation hall, his heart was filled with noise. As you hear this, perhaps you recognize something of your own life in his struggle. How many times have you tried to control your mind only to feel it rebelling even stronger? How many times have you striven for peace only to discover tension instead? In truth, this is a universal pattern. The river of life does not flow faster when we push it. It grows turbulent. The flower does not bloom quicker if we pull at its petals. It withers in our hands. Let us pause here together. Feel the breath once more. Notice how, without your effort, it rises and falls as it always has. You do not need to make it happen. The breath breathes itself. In this simple act is a teaching. You are alive not because you force life, but because life carries you. Chen did not yet understand this. In his heart, he believed awakening was like a mountain to climb, each step earned through sweat and willpower. And so he pressed on, convinced that discipline alone would carve the path. He memorized sutras until the words rang in his ears, even as he slept. He watched his thoughts as though they were thieves creeping into his mind, guarding against distraction with relentless vigilance. He treated the practice not as a friend but as a battlefield. One evening, after a long day of sitting, he approached his master with eyes heavy and spirit weary. "Master," he whispered, "I have been meditating for 10 years. I have followed every instruction counted. Every breath shaped my life around this path. And yet, I feel further from enlightenment than ever. What am I doing wrong?" The master looked at him, his gaze deep and calm, as though it had seen the rising and falling of countless lives. He smiled not unkindly and said words that would shake Chen's entire world. "You are trying too hard. Stop meditating." Imagine the shock in Chen's heart. How could this be? Stop meditating. Wasn't meditation the very doorway to freedom, the bridge across suffering? He stammered. "But Master, without meditation, how will I ever be enlightened?" The old master's smile grew softer, and he asked, "How can you become what you already are?" Let these words linger in your mind as you sink deeper into the pillow. How can you become what you already are? Like a mirror seeking its own reflection, like the ocean yearning to find water. Chen was searching outside himself for what was always within. And so begins the heart of our story, not of effort, but of surrender, not of seeking, but of remembering. Tonight, as we walk through this tale together, let the lesson touch your heart, not as an idea, but as a lullaby guiding you gently toward rest. You do not need to strive. You do not need to struggle. You do not need to meditate in order to be whole. Awareness is already here. Presence is already breathing with you. As the night deepens, imagine yourself sitting beside Chen in that ancient monastery, hearing the rain against the tiles, the faint sound of wind moving through bamboo. You too can let go. You too can rest in what you already are. In the early years of his life in the monastery, Chen was filled with the kind of energy that only a dream can ignite. He believed with every fiber of his being that awakening was waiting for him like a treasure buried at the end of a long road. And so, he threw himself into practice as though each breath were a stone laid upon that road, building a path toward the promise of enlightenment. The mornings began long before the first streaks of dawn painted the sky. When the temple bell rang, the air was still cool, the earth still wrapped in silence. The monks rose together, their robes rustling softly as they made their way into the meditation hall. Chen always hurried to sit near the front, his posture sharp, his gaze unflinching. He believed that every second mattered. He thought, if I can sit longer, straighter, and with more intensity than anyone else, surely I will arrive sooner at the truth. Hours passed in silence. Yet within his mind it was never silent. His thoughts spun and surged. Memories returned like ghosts. Worries stretched their long shadows across the room. Chen tightened his effort. He counted his breaths one after another, as though they were coins that might purchase peace. He held his body so still that even the smallest itch became unbearable. His eyes watered, his knees ached, his back burned, but he did not move. To move felt like failure. There is a teaching in Buddhism: the tighter you grasp the rope, the deeper the burn upon your skin. And yet Chen did not yet know this. To him, practice was not gentle, it was war. As the years moved forward, Chen's devotion only grew sharper. He studied sutras late into the night, memorizing every line, convinced that the secret was hidden in words. He listened to the older monks, imitated their every gesture, and treated his spiritual journey as though it were a ladder he could climb step by step, rung by rung. But the more he tried, the more agitated he became. And perhaps as you listen now, you know this feeling too. You may have worked hard at something believing that effort alone would bring you closer, only to feel more distant than before. The harder you push at the water, the more it slips from your hands. The tighter you clutch the butterfly, the quicker its fragile wings are crushed. Let us pause together for a moment. Breathe slowly. Feel the rise of your chest, the gentle fall of your belly. Let the muscles of your face soften, as if you were smiling at someone you love. There is no need to hold on so tightly. For now, simply allow this breath just as it island. Chen, however, could not yet allow. He believed that if the practice was not working, it must be because he was not working hard enough. And so, he intensified his efforts. 2 hours of sitting became 4. Silent meals were consumed with such rigid focus that he could not taste the food. Walking meditation became a march of discipline, each step heavy with the weight of ambition. His body, once strong and filled with youthful vigor, began to ache with fatigue. His eyes grew hollow. His heart carried the heaviness of disappointment. And yet he would not stop. He told himself, this suffering is only the resistance of the ego. If I can just push through, if I can conquer myself, I will awaken. But peace does not arrive through conquest. Peace is not won by violence, even when the violence is against oneself. There is an old Zen story of a master who held up a flower. All the monks sat in silence, trying to grasp its meaning, straining with their minds to interpret the gesture. Only one monk smiled, and in that smile the master saw the understanding that words and effort could not capture. That monk understood what Chen did not yet realize. Sometimes the answer blooms only when the striving ceases. Still, Chen pressed on. In the evenings, when the monastery grew quiet, he would sit outside beneath the lantern light, poring over scriptures. The characters blurred before his weary eyes, but he refused to rest. His spirit was like a man polishing a mirror day and night, hoping to see his reflection shine more clearly, not realizing that in his furious rubbing, he was scratching the surface until it cracked. Perhaps you too have known such exhaustion. Perhaps you have tried so hard to hold your life together, to keep every detail in order to perfect every action, that rest became impossible. In those moments, you may have felt the body grow tense, the mind grow noisy, the heart grow tired. And yet within that fatigue, there is always a quiet invitation to let go. As you lie here listening, allow yourself to feel the bed beneath you. Let your weight be carried. You do not need to sit like Chen, stiff and unyielding. You do not need to conquer your body or your mind. Here in this moment, the practice is simple: to rest as you are. Years passed, and still Chen did not awaken. He became more distracted, more restless, more frustrated. And yet he clung to the belief that if he just worked harder, he would succeed. The very word mindfulness began to taste bitter to him, like a medicine swallowed too often. The cushion beneath him felt like a punishment. The meditation hall became a prison. But life has its way of teaching what the intellect cannot grasp. Like the river that wears down even the hardest stone, time began to soften Chen's resistance. One morning, after a particularly grueling session, where his thoughts raced louder than ever, he left the hall, his body trembling with weariness. He stepped into the monastery garden. The air smelled of pine and earth. The sunlight touched his face. And for the first time in many years, he sat not to meditate, not to count breaths, not to watch his thoughts. He sat simply because he could not do otherwise. He sat because he was tired. And there, without effort, without intention, something began to change. But that is a part of the story we will wander into later. For now, let the lesson linger. When we try too hard, we often move further away from what we seek. The flower does not open because we demand it. The river does not flow because we push it. They open and flow because it is their nature. As you breathe tonight, remember, You too are like that, flower, like that, river. Peace is your nature. You do not need to force it. You do not need to chase it. You need only allow it to appear gently in its own time. Rest now in that thought. Rest in the simple truth that nothing is missing from this moment. Chen's devotion was fierce, but his struggle only deepened. Each morning, as the temple bell rang, its echo seemed to carry both promise and burden. He would rise in the half-darkness, his robe wrapped tightly around him, the floor cold beneath his bare feet. The hall awaited him silent, lit faintly by lanterns swaying in the dawn breeze. The other monks entered with calm steps, but Chen's heart beat with restless determination. He sat upright, his posture perfect, his body unmoving. His hands rested in his lap, his gaze lowered, his breath counted with mathematical precision. 1, 2, 3. Each inhalation and exhalation he treated as a step toward some distant shore, but the more he counted, the further away he felt. The thoughts did not vanish, they multiplied. They screamed louder, filled with memories, desires, fears, regrets. He clenched his jaw and pressed harder. He believed that stillness must come from effort. If the mind would not obey, then he must subdue it. Hours passed, the sound of shifting robes and breathing of other monks surrounding him. Yet within a storm raged. As you listen now, perhaps you know this storm. Perhaps you have tried to force yourself into calmness, telling your mind to stop, ordering your body to relax, only to feel the tension grow stronger. In truth, the more we demand silence, the more noise appears. The more we chase rest, the further it runs. Take a slow breath with me. Let it rise and fall. Instead of demanding calm, allow whatever is here to be here. Even restlessness can be held gently, like a child crying in your arms. The mother does not silence the child with force. She soothes it with presence. In the same way, we can soothe the heart simply by being with it. Chen did not yet know this. For him, each practice session was a battle. He added walking meditation to his routine, pacing the courtyard with slow, deliberate steps, eyes fixed on the ground before him. He whispered the ancient words of the sutras as though chanting could unlock the door of awakening. He studied late into the night by candlelight, searching in scrolls for a secret technique. But the harder he pressed, the more pain filled him. His body ached constantly. His knees screamed beneath him when he folded them for long sessions. His back stiffened into knots, and in his mind, frustration echoed louder than any mantra. There is an old teaching that says, to try to catch the wind with your fist only leaves you empty-handed. Chen was grasping at peace as though it were an object he could possess, forgetting that peace is the nature of an open hand. One evening, when the exhaustion was especially heavy, Chen recalled a story his first teacher had once told him. It was the story of a man who wished to polish a mirror. Day and night he rubbed the surface, determined to make it shine. But no matter how hard he worked, the mirror grew thinner, duller, and finally cracked in two. The teacher had smiled then and said, "You cannot polish what is already clear." At the time, Chen had nodded, eager to appear wise. But in truth he had not understood. Only now, after years of scraping away at his own mind, did the story return, haunting him with its simplicity. Still, he pressed on, for he feared that to stop was to fail, to rest was to betray his vow. His mind repeated, more effort, more discipline, more control. And so he sat longer, ate less, walked slower, studied deeper. The other monks began to notice. While they practiced with lightness, Chen seemed clenched like a fist, his energy heavy, his brow furrowed. His presence was not one of ease, but of tension. They whispered among themselves, but he paid no attention. To him this suffering was proof that he was burning away his impurities. Yet suffering born from force is not purification, it is only more suffering. Let us pause together once again. Allow your body to rest where it island. Notice the weight of your arms, the softness of your breath, the way the bed or cushion holds you without asking anything in return. You do not need to strive in this moment. You do not need to perform for life. Existence itself is holding you gently the way earth holds the trees, the way the sky holds the stars. Chen could not yet surrender to that holding. He was certain awakening was far away, hidden at the end of endless effort. And so he grew more and more restless. It is said in Zen that enlightenment is like the moon reflected in water. The moon does not enter the water does not hold the moon. And yet, when the surface is still, the reflection is clear. Chen, in his furious effort, was stirring his inner water into constant waves. No wonder the reflection eluded him. One morning, after a punishing 4-hour session, his mind was a chaos of thoughts, each louder than the next. He stood abruptly, his legs trembling, his body drained. He left the hall, without bowing, without speaking, without caring. His feet carried him to the monastery garden, where pine trees swayed gently and a stream murmured over stones. He sat under a tree, but not to meditate. He simply sat because he could no longer bear to strive. His breath came ragged, his shoulders slumped. For the first time in years, he did not count his breath. He did not watch his thoughts. He did not repeat a mantra. He sat defeated. He gave up, and it was there in that surrender that something began to shift. But let us not rush to that part of the story yet. Instead, let us linger in this truth. Exhaustion is not always an enemy. Sometimes exhaustion is the doorway through which surrender enters. Sometimes the breaking point is not a failure, but the opening of the heart. As you listen now, perhaps you too are weary. Weary of chasing, of trying, of holding yourself to impossible measures. If so, let Chen's story offer you this comfort. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to let go. You are allowed to stop chasing peace and allow peace to find you. Close your eyes more deeply. Feel the breath move as it wishes. There is no need to control. You are already carried, already embraced, already safe. The tree under which Chen sat that day was old, its roots coiling deep into the soil, its branches spread like a quiet guardian over the monastery garden. The leaves whispered with the breeze, a sound softer than any sutra, a chant older than words. Chen had not chosen the tree for meditation. He had simply collapsed there, weary and unwilling to fight any longer. For years, he had tried to master his mind, only to feel enslaved by it. Now he was too tired to try. And in that tiredness, something extraordinary began to happen. His body, once clenched like a bow pulled too tight, began to loosen. His shoulders fell. His breath found its own rhythm. His heart, still beating, no longer raced ahead of him. He was not trying to follow the breath. He was not trying to silence the mind. He was not trying to be aware. He was simply sitting as a rock sits on the earth, as a leaf rests upon the water. And in that simple sitting, without intention, without effort, the storm of thoughts softened. Not because he pushed them away, but because he had stopped struggling with them. His mind, which for years had been a battlefield, began to feel like a lake when the wind dies down. Ripples still moved across the surface, but beneath there was quiet depth. For the first time in 15 years, Chen was not meditating. He was simply being. As you hear this, let yourself too release. You do not need to follow your breath perfectly. You do not need to achieve silence. You do not need to control anything. Allow yourself to rest like Chen under the tree, held by the earth, bathed in the air, touched by the warmth of the present moment. In Buddhist teachings, there is a story of a farmer who grew impatient with his crops. Each day he would tug gently at the stalks, believing that his pulling would help them grow taller. But instead of thriving, the plants withered in his hands. His neighbors shook their heads with sorrow. Growth comes naturally when the conditions are right. It cannot be forced. Chen's struggle was like that farmer's pulling. His efforts to force awakening had exhausted him, yet in exhaustion the truth revealed itself. The crops of his mind, once pulled and strained, were finally left to grow on their own. He sat for hours beneath that tree, not as a monk practicing, but as a being simply alive. Birds called from the branches, their songs weaving through the air. A breeze stirred the bamboo stalks nearby, and their hollow trunks hummed like flutes. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, laying patterns of gold across his robe. For once he did not interpret these as signs or metaphors. He did not label them as distractions. He simply experienced them. There is a saying in Zen, sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes and the grass grows by itself. That day Chen tasted the truth of it. Perhaps as you listen, you can feel this too. You do not need to try to be present. You are already here. You do not need to force awareness. Awareness is what hears these words, what feels this breath, what notices the body resting. Even if thoughts arise, awareness is present. Even if sleep comes, awareness continues, like the sky that remains, whether clouds drift by or stars appear. As Chen sat, he realized something that struck him like lightning all these years. He had been treating meditation as though it were a job, enlightenment, as though it were a promotion he could earn through diligence. He had believed presence was something to achieve, awareness, something to develop. But now he saw awareness was not something created. It was the very ground of his being. It was not an achievement. It was what had always been here, quietly waiting. There is a parable of a man searching for his spectacles. He tears apart his house, searching every drawer, every table, every corner. He grows frantic, sweating with effort. And then at last, a friend points gently to his forehead. The spectacles had been there all along. Chen laughed softly, though tears filled his eyes, for he realized he had been searching for what could never be lost. The bell rang from the meditation hall, its sound carrying across the courtyard. The other monks began to rise from their seats. But Chen did not move. He did not feel he had missed practice, nor did he feel he had achieved anything. He simply sat, tasting a freedom so ordinary it seemed miraculous. Later, when he returned to the monastery, his steps were lighter. His face, once drawn tight with strain, carried a softness. His fellow monks looked at him curiously, noticing the change. He did not speak of it. He did not announce a realization. But in the quiet of his presence, something had shifted. He was no longer fighting. As you listen now, let your own body be at ease. Feel the bed beneath you, supporting you without judgment. Let your hands soften, your eyes grow heavy. Notice that you do not need to try to breathe. Breathing is already happening. You do not need to force awareness. It is already here, listening, sensing, resting. In that gentle noticing there is peace. Not the peace of achievement, but the peace of being. When Chen finally rose from beneath the tree, the sun had already traveled far across the sky. His robe was warm from the hours he had spent seated on the grass, and his body, though still weary, carried a softness he had never known before. There was no victory in his step, no sense of accomplishment. There was only ease, as though the weight he had carried for years had quietly slipped from his shoulders without asking permission. He walked back to the monastery, slowly, hearing sounds he had long ignored. The crunch of pebbles beneath his sandals, the hum of insects weaving through the air, the distant laughter of young novices drawing water from the well. None of these things were new. But for the first time he met them without effort, without the burden of seeing them as lessons or distractions. They were simply what they were, and in that suchness there was a freedom far deeper than anything he had tried to attain. That evening, as the monks gathered for their meal, his closest friend Wei noticed something different. Wei had struggled in his own way with meditation, though he never spoke of it openly. His mind was restless, his body tense, and though he envied the ease he imagined in others, he carried his frustrations quietly. But as he sat across from Chen breaking bread in silence, he could not help but see that his friend's eyes were different, softer, lighter, carrying a stillness that could not be forced. After the meal, as the lanterns flickered low, Wei approached him. "Brother Chen," he whispered, "what has happened to you? You seem changed. There is a calmness about you I have never seen before. Please tell me what you discovered." Chen looked at his friend for a long moment before speaking. His voice was gentle without the weight of preaching. "I stopped trying to meditate." Wei frowned. "Stopped? But isn't meditation the very path to awakening? How can you progress without it?" Chen smiled, the kind of smile that does not argue but invites. "Wei, when you sit to meditate, are you trying to become aware?" "Of course," Wei answered. "That is the purpose, to cultivate awareness." "And who is it that knows whether you are aware or not?" Chen asked softly. Wei hesitated. The question struck him like a bell in the still night. He had never thought to look in that direction. "It is me," he stammered. "Exactly," Chen said. "Awareness itself is already here. The very effort to become aware proves it is already present. Who is it that is trying so hard? Who is it that notices the effort? That noticing is awareness itself. You cannot chase it because it is what you are." Wei stood speechless, his thoughts tumbling like stones in a river. Chen continued, "You are like a fish searching for water while swimming in the ocean. You imagine it is somewhere else, so you swim harder, further, faster, all the while surrounded by the very thing you seek. Your effort does not bring you closer. It only blinds you to what is already here." Wei closed his eyes, and in the quiet he felt his breath moving without his control, his heart beating without his command. For a brief moment the truth revealed itself. Life was living him, not the other way around. He did not need to create awareness. He only needed to notice what had never left. Perhaps as you listen now, you too can taste this. Pause for a moment and feel the breath entering, leaving. Notice the chest rise, the belly fall. Did you need to force it? Did you need to make it happen? It is already given moment by moment, gift by gift. In the same way, awareness is already here, cradling every sound, every thought, every sensation. There is a Zen koan that asks, "Who is it that drags this corpse around?" The body moves the mind, thinks the breath flows, but behind it all is the quiet, knowing that never sleeps. That knowing is not something to be achieved. It is the ground of being itself. Wei opened his eyes again, unsettled but touched. "So should I stop meditating as you did?" he asked, his voice almost pleading. Chen shook his head gently. "You are still thinking in terms of doing or not doing, stopping or starting. Meditation is not the point. Awareness island. If sitting helps you sit, if walking helps you walk. But do not imagine that practice will deliver you something you do not already have. Practice is only a way of remembering what is already free." Wei nodded slowly, though confusion still lingered. The old habits of striving ran deep within him. But a seed had been planted, a question that would grow. That night, as he lay upon his mat, Wei heard the distant call of an owl echo through the trees. For once he did not try to label it or to use it as a meditation object. He simply listened. And in that listening there was a moment of ease. As you rest here tonight, you may also notice small glimpses of ease, perhaps in the way the sheets hold your body, perhaps in the sound of your own breath, perhaps in the simple act of hearing these words. Do not chase them. Do not try to hold them. Allow them to pass through as the breeze moves through bamboo, leaving music behind without effort. Buddhism teaches that clinging is the root of suffering. When we cling, even to enlightenment, we turn it into another burden. Chen had discovered this truth not through philosophy, but through exhaustion, through surrender. In giving up, he had stumbled into what was always there. And in that discovery, he no longer needed to chase. He simply lived, and in living, he rested in the awareness that had been his from the beginning. The fish does not need to search for water. The bird does not need to search for sky. And you do not need to search for awareness. It is already what you are. Let your breath move softly now. Let the body sink more deeply into the bed. Let the eyes grow heavy. The search can be set down for tonight. You are already home. The days that followed carried a quiet ripple through the monastery. Chen did not set out to teach, nor did he proclaim his discovery as a doctrine. He simply moved with a new quality of ease, and that ease spoke louder than any sermon. When he walked across the courtyard, his steps were slower, lighter, not bound by the invisible weight of striving. When he ate his rice, he chewed with presence, not with a hidden agenda of being mindful, but with the simple joy of tasting what was before him. When he spoke with the younger novices, his words were gentle, unhurried, free of the sharpness that had once cut through his tone. The change was subtle, but it was undeniable. The other monks noticed. They had seen Chen in his years of fierce discipline, the way his brow furrowed, the way his posture seemed like stone, the way his intensity filled the meditation hall with tension. Now that intensity was gone. What remained was a calm that did not feel forced, a stillness that did not seem brittle. Wei, still pondering the metaphor of the fish searching for water, watched his friend closely. He saw that Chen did not abandon meditation entirely, but when he sat without striving. His breath moved freely, his eyes softened, and, even when he was not on the cushion, the same presence carried into the garden, the library, the kitchen. For Chen, the sacred was no longer confined to ritual. It flowed into every moment. One afternoon, Wei found him in the garden, kneeling in the soil with dirt on his hands. The air smelled of earth and pine, and the sound of wind moved through the bamboo like a low flute. Chen was pulling weeds, humming softly to himself. Wei tilted his head. "Brother, is this now your practice, gardening, instead of sitting?" Chen looked up, his eyes glimmering with amusement. "Practice number, I am simply tending to the garden. But awareness is here too, just as it was on the cushion. When I pull a weed, I feel the earth cool beneath my fingers. When I breathe, I feel the sun on my face. Is this not presence?" Wei stood silently watching him. He realized that perhaps practice was not something separate from life. Perhaps life itself was the practice. The story spread quietly among the monks. Some dismissed it as a phase, a moment of fatigue that would pass. But others grew curious. They had struggled in their own ways, straining against the same walls Chen had faced, whispering doubts into the darkness of their own minds. To see him at peace without effort was like seeing a door open in a wall they had believed unbreakable. One young monk approached him one evening after failing to still his mind during a long meditation. His eyes were red from tears he had hidden. "Brother Chen," he whispered, "I cannot do it. I sit and sit, but my thoughts run wild. The harder I try, the more restless I feel. What should I do?" Chen rested a hand on his shoulder. "What if you did not try at all? What if instead you simply noticed? The breath moves, whether you control it or not. The heart beats, whether you command it or not. Awareness is already here, noticing both. Can you see that? The young monk blinked. For a moment, his tears slowed. The idea was strange, yet comforting. He had been fighting his own mind like an enemy, but perhaps the mind did not need to be subdued. Perhaps it only needed to be seen. As you hear this story, perhaps you too can allow yourself to release the idea of fixing or controlling. Notice the breath in your body rising, falling without forcing it to behave. Notice the thoughts drifting in the mind, appearing, dissolving without needing to chase or resist them. You are not required to sculpt the mind into stillness. You are invited only to witness. There is a parable of a farmer and his ox. The farmer believed that, in order to reach the village, he had to drag the ox by force. Day after day he pulled at the rope, sweating with effort, growing angry at the ox's stubbornness. One day, exhausted, he let go of the rope, and to his surprise the ox walked beside him of its own accord. The ox had never been an enemy. It only needed space to move naturally. So it is with the mind. The harder we pull at it, the more it resists. But when we release it, often walks with us in peace. Chen's way of living did not mean abandoning meditation. It meant releasing the tightness around it. Some monks began to try this themselves. They still sat on the cushion, but without the desperate grasping for results. They treated meditation not as a ladder to climb, but as a chair to rest in. To their surprise, the sessions became lighter, even joyful. Others discovered presence outside the hall. One monk found peace in the rhythm of sweeping the courtyard, each stroke of the broom a reminder of being here. Another found it while copying scriptures, the brush gliding across the paper with a calm that did not need reward. Another found it while cooking, the scent of rice filling the kitchen, each stir of the pot an act of quiet devotion. They began to see what Chen had seen, that awareness was not bound to posture or place. It was the essence of living itself. As you rest here tonight, you might notice this truth in your own life. Perhaps you think you must sit perfectly, breathe correctly, or empty the mind in order to touch peace. But peace does not demand such things. Peace is here, in the weight of the body sinking into the bed. Peace is here, in the sound of your breath, in the faint hum of silence around you. Peace is here, in the simple act of listening. There is no need to earn it. There is no need to chase it. You are already held in it. Chen's presence continued to ripple outward. Though he never claimed to be a teacher, he simply lived. And in his living he reminded others that the sacred is not something to be reached, but something to be noticed. The monastery, once filled with the tension of striving, slowly softened. Not all at once, not for everyone, but for many the practice became lighter, kinder, more human. For now, let this story be your companion. You do not need to push away the day. You do not need to carve the night into stillness. Rest in what is already here. Like Chen in the garden, you can simply be. And in that being, you are already home. The monastery had grown quieter in a new way. It was not that the chanting ceased, or that the sound of bells no longer echoed across the courtyards. Those remained. It was that the air itself seemed lighter, less weighed down by tension. Some monks found themselves smiling more often. Others walked with less stiffness in their shoulders. Presence was no longer something to force. It began to bloom naturally, like wildflowers appearing in the cracks of stone paths. Yet not everyone was at ease with this quiet transformation. The abbot of the monastery, a man of great discipline who had devoted 50 years of his life to formal practice, watched with careful eyes. His back was straight as bamboo, his face lined with the sternness of years spent teaching that only relentless effort could lead to awakening. He had taught hundreds of students the importance of long hours on the cushion of strict attention to posture of discipline as the foundation of spiritual growth. When whispers reached him that some monks were sitting more lightly or even finding presence in simple tasks like gardening or sweeping, he felt a tremor of concern. Was this a softening of the path, a decline in discipline? Could this lead to spiritual laziness, to monks who mistook comfort for realization? One evening he called Chen to his quarters. The oil lamp flickered, casting shadows on the walls lined with scriptures. The abbot's eyes were steady, but there was a question in them, one that carried both authority and genuine care. "Chen," he began, "I have heard that you no longer meditate as you once did, that you have abandoned the rigorous practice passed down through generations. Tell me, if we do not discipline the mind through meditation, how do we prevent it from wandering endlessly? How do we ensure true progress? How can awakening be reached without striving?" Chen bowed deeply before his teacher. His voice was calm without rebellion. "Master, perhaps the desire to measure progress is what prevents it. Perhaps the effort to discipline the mind is what keeps it agitated. Perhaps the fear of laziness is what creates the very tension we struggle against." The abbot's brow furrowed. These words unsettled him. Discipline had been his anchor, his compass, his truth. Could it be that what he had clung to so fiercely was also what kept peace at a distance? He did not dismiss Chen's words outright. Instead, he sat silently after Chen left the lamp burning low. His mind turned to the bamboo grove beyond the monastery walls. There is a parable about bamboo. For the first 4 years after planting, bamboo shows almost no growth above the ground. The farmer waters it, tends the soil, protects it from harm, but still there is little sign of life. Then, in the 5th year, the bamboo suddenly surges upward, growing more than 30 feet in a single season. All that time it had been growing underground, sending down deep roots, preparing for its sudden rise. The abbot thought of his own practice. For 50 years, he had watered the roots with discipline, believing each moment of suffering was necessary. But what if, in all his effort, he had overlooked the simple truth that growth often happens without force, in silence beneath the surface? He decided with both caution and curiosity to test Chen's way. For 1 week he put aside his rigid routine. He still rose at dawn, but he did not force his body into hours of painful sitting. Instead, he ate breakfast slowly, tasting each grain of rice. He walked the grounds, feeling the earth beneath his sandals, the breeze upon his face. He listened to the questions of monks, not with the intent to correct, but simply to be present. He did not try to be spiritual. He simply allowed himself to be human. The first days felt strange, as though he were breaking a vow. His mind told him he was being careless, lazy, even foolish. But as the days unfolded, something unexpected happened. The knots in his back, which had ached for decades from long hours on the cushion, began to loosen. The sharpness in his breath softened. He felt a peace, not the forced peace of discipline, but the gentle peace of one who had stopped fighting himself. On the 6th day, he sat in the bamboo grove at sunset. The stalks swayed above him, their tall bodies singing in the wind. For the first time in many years, he did not try to control his posture. He simply leaned against a trunk, breathing as the world breathed. And there, in that simplicity, he understood what Chen had meant. Awareness was not something to reach. It was what remained when the reaching stopped. Perhaps you too can feel this now. For a moment, allow yourself to stop reaching. You do not need to chase a thought of tomorrow. You do not need to wrestle with the memories of today. Let the body lie heavy where it island. Let the breath come and go as it wishes. Like bamboo, your life grows even when unseen. There is no need to pull at it. Growth unfolds in its own time. By the end of the week, the abbot felt more genuinely peaceful than he had in decades. Not because he had attained something, but because he had finally stopped trying to attain. When he returned to the meditation hall, the monks looked at him with curiosity. He still carried the dignity of a master, but there was something new in his gaze, a softness that even he could not deny. He gathered them, and spoke not of abandoning practice, but of transforming it. Meditation, he said, is not a tool to reach what you are not. It is an opportunity to notice what you already are. Discipline has its place, but without gentleness it becomes a chain. Let us sit not to achieve, but to express the peace already within us. Let us walk, cook, read and garden with the same presence. Awakening is not hidden in the distance. It is here in this breath, in this very moment. His words did not erase years of tradition, but they planted a seed. And from that seed, a quiet revolution began to grow within the monastery. As you drift into rest, perhaps you too can let go of the striving. Perhaps you can trust that beneath the surface of your life, deep roots are already spreading, preparing you for a growth you cannot yet see. There is no need to force it. Like bamboo, your being knows how to rise in its own time. Rest now in that trust. Rest as the bamboo rests, strong and silent, rooted and ready without needing to hurry. The abbot's week of gentle presence became a quiet turning point, though he never called it that. He did not announce a new doctrine, nor did he abandon the structure of the monastery. The bells still rang at dawn. The monks still gathered for meals and prayers. The sutras were still recited with reverence. But something had shifted in the heart of the community. Before, the meditation hall had felt heavy with striving. The air was thick with the silent tension of effort, each monk secretly measuring his progress against his own expectations. Now, as the monks entered the hall, there was a different quality. The stillness was softer, lighter, not brittle, but alive. Some sat with straight spines, others with more relaxed postures, but all with the understanding that they were not forcing the mind into submission. They were simply meeting what was already here. One monk described it later as the difference between holding a bird too tightly and holding it too loosely. If you grip too hard, you harm the bird. If you let go completely, it flies away. But when you hold it gently, it rests in your hands without fear. This was not a new teaching. It was something their ancestors had always known, something hidden in the middle way the Buddha himself had spoken of. And yet, until Chen's surrender and the abbot's experiment, the monks had not fully lived it. A story circulated among them of a musician in ancient times. He wished to play the lute perfectly, so he tightened the strings until they nearly snapped. The sound was harsh, strained, unpleasant. Frustrated, he loosened them completely, but then the strings gave no music at all. Finally, in a moment of insight, he adjusted them to a balance, not too tight, not too loose. From that balance came the sweetest music. The monks realized that their practice was no different. Too tight, and the strain turned meditation into torment. Too loose, and it dissolved into laziness. But balanced with gentleness, practice became music, a song of presence woven into daily life. As you listen, perhaps, you can feel this balance within yourself. Notice your breath. You do not need to hold it tightly, controlling every rise and fall. You do not need to abandon it completely. Simply rest with it, not too tight, not too loose. Let it sing its natural song. The monastery began to change in small but profound ways. Monks who once dreaded long hours on the cushion began to look forward to practice again. Not because they expected enlightenment to arrive as a reward, but because sitting itself felt nourishing, like resting under a tree on a warm day. Others found that presence seeped into their daily tasks. Sweeping the courtyard became an act of meditation. Copying manuscripts became a form of prayer. Cooking rice became as sacred as chanting sutras. They discovered that awareness was not confined to formal practice. It was the thread running through everything. Chen watched this quietly, never claiming credit, never demanding recognition. He did not present himself as a master. He did not lecture. He simply lived with presence, and that presence was teaching enough. One day, as he worked in the garden, a young monk approached him with hesitant steps. "Brother Chen," he asked, "how will I know when I am enlightened?" Chen paused, brushing soil from his hands. He looked at the monk and asked, "Right now, are you aware that you are asking this question?" The young monk blinked. "Yes." "Then, awareness is already here," Chen said gently. "What more could you need to know?" The monk frowned, confused but thoughtful. For days those words lingered in his mind. He began to see that he was always waiting for a future moment, a grand arrival. Yet the awareness that heard his waiting was never absent. Perhaps as you hear this, you too can feel it. The mind may ask, when will peace come? When will sleep arrive? When will I finally be at ease? But notice, the very awareness of that question is peace itself, already present, already awake. There is a Zen saying, "Every day is a good day." It does not mean that every day is free of suffering or that joy is constant. It means that, when we rest in awareness, even sorrow and fatigue are met with presence, and in that presence, life itself is complete. The abbot too felt the change in himself. He noticed that when he listened to the monk's questions, he no longer rushed to give answers. He simply heard them fully, and often that was enough. He noticed that when he walked the grounds, the aches in his body no longer consumed him. His steps were slower, more peaceful. For decades he had sought peace through discipline. Now peace had entered quietly, when discipline loosened its grip. And so the monastery did not abandon meditation, but they no longer treated it as a ladder to climb. Instead, it became a mirror, reflecting what was already here. Some monks still sat for hours, but without the desperation of before. Others meditated in the rhythm of work, in the flow of chores, in the simple act of breathing. All began to see that enlightenment was not a treasure hidden in the distance, but the ordinariness of their own awareness. As you rest here, let this truth soften your heart. You do not need to wait for the perfect moment to feel peace. You do not need to strive for some distant awakening. The awareness that hears these words, that feels this breath, that rests in this body, this is it. This is the presence you have been seeking. Let the body sink deeper into the bed. Let the breath move freely. Let the mind with all its thoughts be held in awareness without judgment. You are not practicing to become something else. You are remembering what you already are. The change within the monastery spread like the fragrance of blossoms carried by the wind. It was subtle at first, yet unmistakable. The air that once held the tension of effort now felt more like a river flowing steadily, calmly, without needing to rush. Each monk seemed to discover presence in ways unique to their nature, as though awareness had many doors, and each one could be opened in its own time. One elder monk, who had long suffered from aching knees, found his peace in the garden. He had always considered tending plants to be a chore, something separate from true meditation. But now, as he knelt among rows of vegetables, his hands brushing soil and pulling weeds, he felt the earth cool against his skin. The smell of damp soil rose into the morning air. The delicate shoots trembled in the breeze, and he realized that in this simple tending awareness was alive. The garden was no longer work to endure. It became the very place of awakening. Another monk, younger and restless, found his path in the library. He had struggled for years with sitting meditation, his mind always wandering into dreams and stories. But now when he copied ancient scriptures with brush and ink, he let his hand move slowly, each stroke deliberate, each character a small act of presence. The scratching sound of the brush, the soft texture of the paper, the gentle curve of each line, all of it became meditation. The words he once recited mechanically now lived through his hand, each letter a form of mindfulness. And still another discovered presence in the kitchen. Stirring rice, chopping vegetables, stoking the fire. These tasks had once seemed far from the sacred halls of practice. Yet in the warmth of the hearth, in the rhythm of stirring, in the fragrance rising with steam, he found that the sacred was not absent. Awareness filled the pot, the fire, the food, and the act of nourishing others became as holy as chanting. The monks began to understand the old saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Nothing in the tasks had changed. Wood was still chopped, water still carried, but the quality of presence within the doing was transformed. Perhaps as you listen, you can imagine this truth in your own life. Washing dishes, folding clothes, making tea, these may not appear as spiritual practices. Yet if you enter them with awareness, if you notice the warmth of the water, the texture of the fabric, the rising steam from the cup, they too become doors into peace. You do not need to separate the sacred from the ordinary. The sacred is woven into every breath of the ordinary. Let us pause together now. Feel the rise and fall of your breath. Imagine yourself lifting a small cup of tea. You notice the warmth against your fingers, the fragrance rising to your nose, the taste spreading across your tongue. You do not hurry. You do not measure. In that moment there is only tea, only presence, only you, resting in the act itself. This is meditation, as Chen had discovered it, not a battle with the mind, but a returning to what is already here. Not a technique to gain something, but a way of resting in what cannot be lost. The abbot watched these changes with a softened heart. He had once feared that loosening the grip of discipline would lead to laziness. Instead, he saw the opposite. The monks, freed from the burden of striving, approached their tasks with more sincerity. They no longer rushed through chores to return to the meditation hall as if sacredness lived only on the cushion. They found that sweeping the courtyard could be as profound as sitting in silence, that serving food could be as holy as chanting scripture. The monastery, once rigid with tension, now breathed with a gentler rhythm. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of amber and violet, the abbot walked the grounds slowly. He passed the garden where laughter rose among the rows of vegetables. He passed the kitchen where the scent of rice filled the air. He passed the library where the scratching of brushes on parchment sounded like a quiet chant. And he realized, perhaps for the first time, that the entire monastery itself had become a meditation hall. There is a Zen koan that says, "The ordinary mind is the way." For years the monks had thought they needed to transcend their ordinary lives to touch the sacred. Now they were beginning to see that the way was not beyond the ordinary, but within it. Chen himself often chose to sit in the garden rather than in the hall. He did not do so to rebel against tradition, but because presence flowed there as naturally as water through a stream. Sometimes he sat among the vegetables, watching the sun rise and set. Other times he worked with his hands, planting, weeding, harvesting. To him there was no division between sitting and working, between meditating and living. Wei continued to wrestle with his conditioning. Though Chen's words had touched him deeply, years of striving had carved grooves in his mind. He often caught himself trying too hard, measuring his progress, doubting his ease. But whenever he felt this struggle, he remembered Chen's gentle question, "Who is it that knows you are not aware enough? Isn't that awareness itself?" And in remembering, his grip loosened, if only for a moment. Perhaps you too feel this struggle within yourself, the habit of measuring, the fear of not doing enough. The doubt that peace could be so simple. But tonight, as you listen, allow that grip to soften. You do not need to measure your rest. You do not need to count how peaceful you are. The very awareness that hears this voice is already whole. Imagine yourself now carrying water in a wooden bucket. The weight pulls at your arms. The water sloshes gently with each step. You feel the strain, but you also feel the life in the act, the coolness of the water, the creak of the handle, the rhythm of walking. You do not rush to reach the well or the kitchen. Each step is complete in itself. This is presence, this is meditation, this is the way. The monks came to see that enlightenment was not an extraordinary state, but the ordinariness of awareness itself. The sacredness of sweeping, the holiness of washing rice, the peace of hearing the wind through bamboo. These were not lesser than sitting on a cushion. They were the same. As you drift deeper into rest, let this truth cradle you. You do not need to seek some grand awakening. You do not need to perfect the mind. You only need to notice what is here, the breath, the body, the gentle rhythm of awareness that never leaves you. And in this noticing, even the act of falling asleep becomes a form of meditation. Each breath draws you closer to stillness. Each moment of rest is already sacred. Seasons passed in the monastery, each one carrying its own rhythm of presence. The monks moved through spring blossoms, summer rains, autumn winds, and winter snow, with a new awareness that flowed naturally into all they did. The air in the meditation hall no longer pressed with strain. Instead, it felt like a field at dawn, open, still alive, with quiet possibility. Word of this change began to spread beyond the walls of the monastery. Pilgrims and seekers arrived from distant villages, drawn by whispers of a monk who had refused to meditate, yet whose presence carried a serenity that could not be explained. They came hoping to learn his secret, to find the hidden technique that would free them from their own restlessness. One afternoon, a small group of visitors gathered in the garden where Chen was kneeling among rows of vegetables. The sun was gentle, and the air smelled faintly of pine. His robe was dusted with soil, his hands stained from working the earth. To the visitors, he did not look like a master, he looked like a gardener. And yet there was something in the way he touched the plants, in the ease of his movements, that drew them close. Master Chen. One of them asked, "What is the secret to enlightenment? What practice should we follow? What techniques will lead us to awakening?" Chen leaned back on his heels, brushing the dirt from his hands. His eyes clear as still water met theirs. "You are already awake," he said softly. "The question is not how to become enlightened, but how to stop pretending you are not." The visitors exchanged uneasy glances. But surely, one protested, "We need discipline, a practice, a method. Otherwise, how will we reach the truth?" Chen smiled, his voice as calm as the breeze that stirred the leaves. "If you feel you need practice, then practice. But understand that you are not practicing to become something. You are practicing to remember what you already are. And if you feel no need to practice, then do not. But do not imagine that by avoiding practice you escape anything. You are simply recognizing what is already free." The visitors fell silent. These words unsettled them, yet they carried a strange comfort. They had traveled so far seeking a treasure, only to be told it was already within them. Perhaps as you hear this now, you recognize the same longing within yourself, the belief that peace is hidden far away, that awakening is a prize to be earned. Yet notice the very awareness that hears these words is already awake. You do not need to chase it. You do not need to deserve it. It has always been here. There is a story often told in Buddhist circles of a lion cub who was raised among sheep. From the moment of his birth, he followed the flock, eating grass, bleating like the others, believing himself to be one of them. He lived in fear, always on guard, trembling at the thought of predators. One day, an old lion spotted him and was astonished to see a lion acting like a sheep. The old lion dragged the young one to a still pond and forced him to look at his reflection. At first the cub resisted, bleating with fear. But when he finally saw his own face in the water, he realized the truth. He was not a sheep, he was a lion. The story ends there with the cub's roar echoing across the valley, not a roar learned through training, but the natural roar of what he already was. Chen's words were like that reflection in the pond. The visitors came believing themselves sheep, seeking a method to become lions. But Chen showed them the water, revealing that their true nature was already present. They did not need to earn it. They only needed to see it. As you rest now, perhaps you too can feel this truth. You do not need to strive to be enough. You do not need to prove yourself worthy of peace. The lion's roar is already within you. The awareness that knows your restlessness is the very awareness you are seeking. It is here in this moment, complete. One visitor, still unsettled, pressed further. But Master Chen, if awakening is already here, why do we feel so lost? Why do our lives feel filled with struggle and sorrow? Chen's gaze softened. Because you believe the clouds are separate from the sky. But the sky does not lose itself when clouds pass through it. Awareness does not disappear because thoughts and feelings drift across it. You are not lost. You are simply pretending. Let the pretending fall, and you will see you were never absent. The visitors sat in silence, each carrying the words in their own way. Some resisted, clinging to the idea that effort alone could save them. Others felt a quiet relief, as though a burden had been lifted. Still others were confused, caught between old beliefs and new possibilities. But all of them felt something shift, however small. As the sun lowered and shadows stretched across the garden, Chen returned to his work. He pulled a weed, pressed the soil gently around a growing plant, and hummed softly to himself. To him, there was nothing extraordinary about what he had said. He had not taught a method nor given a secret. He had simply reminded them of what they already were. Perhaps you too can rest in that reminder. Feel your body lying where it is supported without effort. Notice the breath moving on its own, carrying you gently like a river carrying a leaf. Awareness is not something to build. It is what holds you now, without condition, without judgment. You are not a sheep waiting to become a lion. You are the lion who has forgotten. And in the stillness of this moment, the truth of your nature shines quietly, like the reflection on a pond at dusk. Rest in that reflection. Rest in the truth that nothing is missing, nothing is broken, nothing is incomplete. You are already awake. The visitors left the monastery carrying Chen's words like seeds in their hearts. Some would forget them, quickly lost in the noise of the world. But for others, those words would return in quiet moments, while pouring water into a cup, while walking alone at dusk, while waking in the still hours of the night. They would remember the monk who told them, "You are already awake," and a flicker of recognition would stir, as if something hidden long ago had been softly revealed. Within the monastery itself, the influence of Chen's presence continued to ripple outward. Not through sermons, not through debates, but through the simple way he lived. His stillness was not rigid but alive, not the stillness of a stone, but of a lake reflecting the moon. When others sat beside him, their own restlessness often softened, as though his ease reminded them of their own forgotten ease. One evening, Wei sat with him beneath the lantern light. The courtyard was quiet, the night air cool, the stars scattered like jewels across the sky. Wei's brow was furrowed, his heart restless. "Brother," he said softly, "I have practiced for so many years, and still I feel far from awakening. Even when I try to let go, I end up trying to let go. Even when I tell myself not to strive, I am striving not to strive. How can I ever escape this circle?" Chen listened, his eyes calm, his breath steady. After a long pause, he asked Wei, "Who is it that knows you are striving? Who is it that sees the circle?" Wei hesitated. The question pierced deeper than he expected. "It is me," he answered, uncertain. Chen shook his head gently. "Not you, Wei. Awareness. The very awareness that notices striving is not itself striving. The awareness that sees the circle is not trapped within it. You cannot escape awareness because you are it." Wei lowered his eyes, his thoughts spinning. The words seemed both simple and impossible. Chen leaned closer, his voice soft as the night wind. "There is a Zen question. What is the face you had before you were born?" Wei looked up, puzzled. "How can one have a face before birth?" Chen smiled. "It is not about features or form. It points to the awareness that was never born and will never die. The awareness that hears these words now, the awareness that knew your striving before you named it, that is your true face. You do not need to create it. You only need to notice it." For a long time, Wei sat in silence. The lantern flickered. The cicadas sang in the grass. At last, he whispered, "Then, all these years I have been searching for what was never absent." Chen nodded. Like a man searching for his shadow running through the fields, never realizing it was with him all along. Perhaps you too can pause here and sense the same truth. Notice that thoughts come and go, perhaps doubts, perhaps longings, perhaps memories. Yet the awareness that sees them is unchanged. It was here before the thought arose. It remains as the thought passes. It will still be here when the mind quiets. That awareness is not something to earn. It is the face you had before you were born. Wei felt tears well in his eyes. For years, he had sat in discipline, measuring his progress, punishing himself for distraction. Now he glimpsed that all along the very act of noticing his distraction proved the awareness he sought was already present. "Brother Chen," he whispered, "if this is true, then why practice at all? Why sit? Why chant? Why study?" Chen placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because practice can remind you of what you are. Not to create something new, but to help you remember. Sitting is like polishing a mirror, not to make it reflect, for it already reflects, but to notice the reflection more clearly. Practice is not a ladder to climb. It is an expression of the truth that is already here." Wei breathed deeply, as though a great weight had begun to lift. He did not feel fully free, not yet, but he felt a door open within him, a door he had not known existed. Perhaps as you listen now, you can feel this too, that your own awareness is not something you must chase. It is not hidden behind layers of effort. It is the space in which all effort arises. It is the sky that holds both clouds and stars, unchanged by either. There is a story of a monk who sought the Buddha with desperate longing. He prayed, he fasted, he sat in silence for years. At last, exhausted, he fell asleep. In his dream, the Buddha appeared and said, "You search for me as if I were far away, but I am the awareness in which you search." When he woke, he laughed, realizing that what he had sought was never separate. So it is with you, dear listener. You may spend years trying to quiet the mind, to perfect the practice, to reach a distant awakening. But in truth, the very awareness of your striving is already the awakening you seek. You cannot be apart from it. As the night deepens around you, let this truth cradle you. You do not need to strive to fall asleep. Sleep-like awareness comes naturally when you stop trying to force it. The body knows how to rest. The mind knows how to soften. Awareness is here holding you through it all. Let your breath move gently. Let your body sink deeper. Thoughts may come, but they are only clouds passing through the vast sky of your being. the face you had before you were born, that awareness is here now, untouched, infinite, at peace. Rest in that face. Rest in the truth that you are already what you seek. The monastery, once bound by the heavy silence of effort, now breathed with a new kind of quiet, not the brittle quiet of tension, but the supple quiet of presence. Monks who had once measured each day by the hours they sat now began to discover that awareness was not limited to the cushion. It was present when they walked, when they spoke, when they worked, when they rested. The entire monastery became alive with this shift, like a garden after the first rain of spring. One monk, who had struggled for years with restlessness, began to approach his sitting practice differently. He no longer sat as though climbing a steep mountain, counting each step in agony. Instead, he sat as one might sit on a porch at dusk, watching the sun sink beyond the horizon. His posture was still upright, but no longer rigid. His breath was steady, unforced. And to his surprise, he found that the mind softened more easily when he was not trying to conquer it. Another monk, younger and fiery in spirit, confessed to Chen, "When I sit, I still feel the urge to make my mind quiet, to force away the noise. I know you say awareness is already here, but how can I stop this habit?" Chen listened, his gaze steady. "Do you remember the story of the lute strings?" The young monk nodded faintly. "When the string is too tight, it snaps," Chen said. "When it is too loose, it makes no sound. But when it is tuned just right, music flows effortlessly. Your effort has been too tight, and your surrender perhaps too loose. Now find the middle, sit with sincerity, but without force. Allow the music of awareness to play itself." The young monk breathed deeply, as though those words loosened a knot within his chest. Perhaps you too can feel this teaching in your own body. Notice your breath. You do not need to pull it tight, holding it in control. You do not need to abandon it completely. Rest with it, balanced, tuned, like a gentle string. From this balance, peace arises naturally. In time, many monks found themselves smiling at simple things: the sound of water being poured, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the warmth of sunlight against stone walls. These moments, once overlooked as ordinary, now shimmered with sacredness. They saw that presence was not a state to enter, but the fabric of reality itself, woven into each passing moment. One afternoon, as the monks gathered in the hall, the abbot spoke with unusual softness. His voice, once stern, now carried the calm weight of one who had tasted surrender. "For years," he said, "I believed discipline alone could lead us to freedom. I taught you to sit longer, to hold stricter, to strive harder. And though discipline has its place, I now see it is not the heart of practice. The heart is awareness itself. Simple, ordinary, always here. Meditation is not a tool to gain enlightenment. It is the expression of enlightenment already alive within you." The hall grew still, the monks listening with open hearts. Some felt relief, others confusion, but all sensed that something profound had shifted. Wei, who had long struggled, sat in the corner, his hands folded in his lap. Chen's words had begun to sink deeper into him over the weeks. He no longer despised his restlessness. Instead, he met it with gentleness, like one holding a restless bird in cupped hands. Slowly, he began to realize that even restlessness was not outside awareness. Even distraction was already illuminated by presence. There is a story of a master who was asked, "What is meditation?" He replied, "It is like the cowherd who watches over his cows. He does not chase them wildly, nor does he abandon them. He simply watches with steady eyes, and the cows remain in sight. So it is with the mind. Thoughts will wander, but awareness does not need to chase them. It only needs to watch, steady, gentle, allowing all to pass within its embrace." As you hear this, perhaps you can feel yourself as that cowherd. Do not chase your thoughts. Do not try to drive them away. simply notice them. They come and go, yet awareness remains. The one who notices is never lost. The monks carried this shift into their daily tasks. The sound of sweeping became like chanting each stroke of the broom a prayer. Carrying water became a meditation, the bucket swaying gently, the cool drops falling against the skin. Cooking became devotion, each grain of rice sacred, each stir of the pot a gesture of love. The monastery no longer drew such sharp lines between sacred and ordinary. The sacred was everywhere, in every act, in every breath. One evening Wei sat with Chen by the pond. The surface of the water reflected the moon shimmering in the night breeze. Brother Wei said, "For the first time I feel I am beginning to understand. Awareness is not something to create, but something to recognize. And yet, I still forget again and again. One moment I see it, the next, I am lost in thought. Will it always be this way?" Chen picked up a small stone and dropped it into the pond. Ripples spread outward, distorting the moon's reflection. "Do you see?" he asked. "The moon is never lost. Only the water is disturbed. When the ripples fade, the reflection returns. Awareness is never absent, even when the mind is busy. Forgetting and remembering are both waves upon the same pond. What you truly are remains untouched." Wei watched the ripples settle the moon, returning to clarity. He nodded, tears rising in his eyes. Perhaps you too can rest in this truth. Even if your mind is busy, even if you feel restless, awareness is not disturbed. It holds every ripple, every wave without resistance. You do not need to silence the water. You need only trust that beneath every ripple the clarity is always there. As you drift toward sleep, let this image carry you. Imagine the pond of your mind, ripples, moving, reflections, shifting. But beneath the water is vast, the depth is calm, the awareness unbroken. You are not the ripples, you are the water. You are not the passing thoughts. You are the awareness in which they pass. Rest now as the pond rests. Rest as the moon rests upon the water. The monastery continued to live and breathe in this new way, each monk finding his own doorway into presence. For some, the doorway was still the cushion, the quiet hours of sitting, when the body rested like a mountain and the breath moved like wind through trees. For others, the doorway was the rhythm of work, the movements of the hands, the texture of the world meeting the senses. One afternoon, while the sky glowed pale blue and cicadas sang their steady chorus, the monks gathered in the courtyard. It was a day of rest, and the abbot sat among them, his eyes soft, his posture easy. He held in his hand a single flower, freshly plucked from the garden. Its petals were delicate, trembling slightly in the breeze, its fragrance subtle and sweet. The monks looked at him, expecting a teaching. They had grown used to words, to long discourses that explained the path that mapped the mind. But the abbot said nothing. He simply lifted the flower, holding it before them in silence. The courtyard grew very still. Some monks furrowed their brows, trying to understand. Others waited anxiously for the explanation. But Chen, sitting among them, smiled. His smile was quiet, unforced, as natural as the flower itself. The abbot met Chen's gaze, and for a long moment their eyes held a silent recognition. Then the abbot smiled too, and in that simple exchange, a lesson deeper than any sutra was revealed. Truth does not always need words. Awareness does not need explanation. Sometimes a flower is enough. This story lived on in the monastery, passed among the monks as a reminder that the way is not always found in concepts but in direct seeing. The flower did not symbolize awareness. It was awareness just as the act of seeing it was awareness. Perhaps, as you hear this, you can pause and notice something simple near you. Perhaps the feel of the sheets beneath your hand, the sound of your own breath, the faint glow of darkness around you. You do not need to name it. You do not need to explain it. Simply notice as Chen noticed the flower and allow presence to reveal itself without effort. One monk, inspired by this moment, began to spend more time in the kitchen garden. He had always rushed through the task of watering plants, treating it as labor to finish quickly so he could return to real practice. But now he slowed down. He noticed the weight of the watering jar in his hands, the arc of water pouring over the soil, the way the plants trembled as they drank. Each drop became a miracle, a teaching of its own. He realized that tending the garden was not separate from meditation, it was meditation. Another monk who often worked in the scriptorium discovered the same truth. Copying texts had once been tiresome, his hand aching as he filled page after page with characters. But when he let go of the idea of achievement, he began to notice the feel of the brush, the sound of ink against paper, the flow of lines forming meaning. The task became alive, not because of what it produced, but because of how fully it was lived in each stroke. The monastery itself seemed to change. The clang of pots in the kitchen became music. The sweeping of the courtyard became rhythm. The rustle of robes in the meditation hall became harmony. The sacred was no longer confined to rituals or ceremonies. It had seeped into everything. There is a saying, "The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the earth." The monks began to live this saying, realizing that presence was not in extraordinary feats but in ordinary acts done with awareness. Wei too began to soften. He still struggled, still caught himself striving, but he was gentler now. One morning, as he carried water from the well, he felt the cool droplets splash against his skin. He paused, noticing their freshness, their life. For a moment he smiled, realizing that this simple act was enough. He did not need to fight his thoughts. He did not need to achieve some lofty state. Carrying water itself was the practice. Perhaps you too can feel this in your own life. Think of the simplest actions: washing a cup, folding a shirt, opening a window. These too can be your practice. You do not need to set them apart to call them ordinary. They are as sacred as any ritual, for awareness is present in them, just as it is in meditation. Let us pause together. Take a breath. Imagine holding a flower in your hand, its petals soft, its fragrance delicate. You do not need to analyze it to explain its beauty. You only need to see it, to hold it gently, to allow it to be what it island. In that seeing, awareness is alive. The abbot's silent gesture of the flower became a turning point, not because it taught something new, but because it revealed what had always been there. The monks realized that awakening was not hidden in complexity. It was as simple as a flower, as ordinary as breath, as natural as being itself. And in that simplicity they found rest. As the night deepens around you, remember this: you do not need to chase extraordinary miracles. The miracle is already here, in the breath, in the softness of the pillow beneath you, in the awareness that never leaves you. Rest in this miracle. Rest as the monks rested, smiling at the sight of a flower, realizing it was enough. The image of the abbot holding up a flower lingered in the hearts of the monks for many days. Some tried to explain it to themselves, to find words that could capture the moment, but soon they realized that the silence itself had been the teaching. The flower did not need explanation. It was enough simply to see it, simply to be with it. In that simple presence, a truth more profound than any doctrine revealed itself. Yet, in the quiet of his own chambers, the abbot found himself reflecting more deeply than ever before. For decades he had believed that discipline was the only path to freedom. He had measured progress by the hours spent on the cushion, by the number of breaths counted, by the rigidity of posture. But Chen's journey and the shift in the monastery had shown him something unexpected. That discipline, when clung to too tightly, became another chain. He remembered the story of bamboo. For 4 years the bamboo seed hides its growth beneath the soil. A farmer waters, it tends to it, nourishes it with patience, but nothing appears. Then in the 5th year it shoots up rapidly, reaching heights of 30 feet in a single season. The years of invisibility were not wasted. They were the time when roots grew deep, unseen but essential. The abbot realized that much of his own discipline had been like pulling at the stalks, demanding that they grow faster. He had mistaken outward effort for true growth. Perhaps the stillness he had long sought had been quietly rooting itself within, waiting for him to stop tugging, to allow it to rise on its own. One evening, he shared this reflection with the community. The monks sat in a circle, lanterns casting warm light across their faces. The abbot's voice, once firm with authority, now carried a softness born of humility. For many years, he said, I taught that only effort could bring you closer to awakening. But I see now that awakening is not something effort creates. It is what effort sometimes conceals. Like bamboo, the roots of awareness are always spreading beneath the surface, even when you see nothing. You do not need to force the stalks upward. You need only to tend gently with trust. The growth will come in its own time. The monks listened, some with tears in their eyes. They had feared that their struggles were failures, that their restlessness was proof of weakness. But now they began to see that even their struggles were part of the unseen rooting. Awareness was not absent during those times. It was the soil itself in which all struggle grew. Perhaps you too can take comfort in this truth. You may feel that peace is far away, that you have practiced or tried for years without result. But like bamboo, growth often happens unseen. Awareness is already alive within you, quietly spreading roots. You do not need to pull at it. You only need to trust that it is here waiting to rise. Let us pause together. Feel your breath moving in and out. You do not need to deepen it or slow it. Simply notice it as though noticing the soil after rain. You cannot force the seeds to sprout, but you can rest in the knowing that they are alive beneath the surface. In the same way, you can rest in the knowing that awareness is already here, even if you cannot yet see its full height. The abbot's words marked a gentle turning in the monastery. No longer did the monks see their restlessness as failure. No longer did they cling to effort as the only way forward. Instead, they learned to balance discipline with surrender, effort with ease, doing with being. Wei, who had struggled more than most, felt a deep sigh of relief within him. He realized that all his years of difficulty had not been wasted. They were not proof of failure, but part of the rooting. Even in his most restless hours, awareness had been present, watching, holding. His striving had not destroyed the truth, it had only delayed his seeing it. There is a story of a young monk who asked his master, "How long will it take me to be enlightened if I practice with great effort?" The master replied, 10 years. The monk, eager, said, "What if I practice twice as hard?" The master smiled and said, 20 years. Bewildered, the monk asked, "And if I give my whole life, sparing no moment?" The master answered, "Then perhaps 50 years. The lesson was clear. The harder one tries to grasp awakening, the further it slips away. It is not won by grasping, but by letting go. Perhaps you can feel this in your own life. The times you have tried to force sleep, did it come more easily, or did it evade you even more? But when you surrender, when you allow, when you rest without demand, sleep arrives like a gentle guest. So too with peace, so too with awakening. The abbot himself began to live this truth more deeply. When he walked through the bamboo grove, he no longer analyzed his steps or counted his breaths. He simply walked, the earth steady beneath him, the wind cool against his face. When he sat with the monks, he no longer measured their discipline but met them with presence. The monastery no longer felt like a place of rigid striving but like a living organism, breathing, growing, unfolding naturally. Chen continued to work in the garden, planting and harvesting with the same quiet ease. He spoke little, yet his presence reminded everyone of what had been discovered, that enlightenment is not a prize to be earned, but the recognition of what has always been. As you listen now, let this recognition soften you. You do not need to pull at the stalks of your own being. You do not need to rush your growth. Awareness is already rooting itself within you, deep and steady. Trust that in its own time it will rise. Rest in that trust. Rest as bamboo rests beneath the soil, alive, preparing without hurry. The monastery had become a place of quiet revolution. No walls had been torn down, no rules rewritten, no ceremonies abandoned. And yet everything was different. Where once the air felt heavy with striving, now it shimmered with ease. Where once the monks carried furrowed brows and rigid backs, now their faces softened, their movements slower, their laughter gentler. The change was not dramatic, but it was undeniable. It was the kind of change that happens when a river, after years of rushing, finally remembers its natural flow. The abbot, who had lived longer than most and carried decades of discipline upon his shoulders, found himself lighter too. He had feared that loosening the grip of practice would bring decay, that monks would fall into laziness. But instead he saw the opposite. Freed from the burden of striving, the monks gave themselves more fully to each moment. They did not avoid their practice, they entered it with sincerity, but now with joy rather than fear. Morning bells still rang. The monks still gathered in the hall, still recited the sutras, still sat in meditation. But now the hall felt different. No longer was it a battlefield where each monk struggled against himself. It had become a space of rest where each monk sat as naturally as a tree stands in the forest, as clouds drift across the sky. Some monks still preferred long sessions, their legs folded, their spines tall, their breaths flowing gently. Others found their practice in work, sweeping leaves, tending the garden, cooking rice. Yet none of them felt excluded. None of them felt lesser. The abbot, who once measured devotion by hours spent on the cushion, now spoke with new wisdom. Practice is not in how long you sit. It is in how fully you live. Presence is not measured in hours, but in sincerity. One day, a young monk asked him, "Master, how will I know when I have reached enlightenment?" The abbot chuckled softly, a sound the monks had rarely heard from him before. "Every day is a good day," he replied. The monk tilted his head, confused. How could that be true? Were there not days of sorrow, days of loss, days when the heart ached with loneliness? Yet the abbot's words lingered, echoing in the silence. Slowly the monk began to see. A good day was not a day free from pain or difficulty. A good day was any day lived in awareness. Any day met with presence. Even sorrow, when held in awareness, became part of the vast sky of being. Perhaps you too can taste this truth. There may have been days recently when your heart was heavy, when your body was tired, when life seemed overwhelming. Yet here you are, resting in this moment, aware of the breath moving through you. Even this is a good day. Not because everything is perfect, but because awareness is here holding it all. Let us pause together. Take a slow breath in and out. Feel the body supported where it rests. Notice that the present moment is already complete, already whole. This moment, just as it is a good moment. This day, whatever it carried, is a good day. The monks began to live with this spirit. When rain fell, they heard its rhythm as music, the drops pattering against roof tiles and leaves, When snow blanketed the courtyard, they walked slowly, savoring the crunch beneath their sandals. When sorrow visited, they no longer resisted it with fear, but met it gently, like greeting an old friend who had come to teach. Wei, who had always been the most restless, found himself softening more each day. One morning, as he swept the courtyard, he felt a sudden wave of sadness for no clear reason. In the past, he would have tried to push it away, to silence it with discipline. But now, he simply noticed it. He felt the weight of the broom in his hands, heard the scrape against stone, smelled the faint scent of pine in the air. And in that awareness, the sadness was not an enemy. It was simply another cloud drifting through the sky. He whispered to himself, "Every day is a good day," and continued sweeping with a lighter heart. There is a story told of a master who was asked, "What is enlightenment?" He replied, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The simplicity of the answer puzzled his students. But later they realized the meaning. Enlightenment is not a distant state to be achieved. It is the simple act of living fully in the moment, of eating when eating, of sleeping when sleeping, of meeting life without resistance. As you rest here tonight, perhaps you can practice the same. Do not wait for tomorrow to bring peace. Do not wait for some distant moment to feel whole. Let this very breath be enough. Let this rest be enough. In the simple act of lying here, of breathing, of being, the fullness of life is already present. The abbot, reflecting on his own journey, often returned to the bamboo grove. He would sit among the tall stalks, feeling their strength and grace. He realized that for decades he had demanded that the bamboo grow according to his will, forcing his practice with rigid control. But the bamboo had always grown in its own way, steady, patient, effortless. Awareness, too, grows in its own rhythm, not according to the demands of the mind. He once shared this reflection with Chen, who listened quietly as he worked in the garden. "I used to think I was the one carrying discipline," the abbot said. "Now I see that it was discipline carrying me, and when I loosened my grip, awareness was waiting all along." Chen smiled, brushing soil from his hands. "Master, the river flows whether you push it or not. The grass grows whether you demand it or not. Awareness is no different. It only waits for us to stop pretending it is absent." The abbot nodded, his eyes glistening with the humility of one who had lived long enough to learn anew. As the monastery settled into this new rhythm, visitors continued to come, seeking the secret. Some left puzzled, others relieved, but all carried with them the same seed. The seed of recognition that awakening is not about becoming something else. It is about remembering what has always been. And so the monastery lived on, not with the harsh silence of effort, but with the soft silence of presence. Each day the monks discovered again and again that every day is a good day. As you drift deeper into rest, let that truth settle in you too. Today, whatever it has held, is already a good day. Not because it was easy, not because it was free of pain, but because awareness held it all, just as awareness holds you now. Rest in that awareness. Rest in the simple miracle of this breath, this body, this moment. Every day is a good day, and this night too is a good night. As the seasons turned and the monastery settled into its new rhythm, the monks came to see meditation with fresh eyes. What had once been treated as a ladder to climb, each rung earned through sweat and discipline, was now understood as something gentler, something closer to a mirror, reflecting what had always been present. They no longer sat with the weight of expectation pressing upon them. Instead, they sat as one might sit at the edge of a quiet lake, not to make the water still, but to notice the stillness that arises when nothing is forced. For some, this was a revelation so subtle that it felt ordinary, and yet in that ordinariness lay a depth they had never touched before. One monk described it this way: "Before I sat to make the mind quiet, Now I sit because the mind is already quiet beneath the noise. Before I sat to become aware. Now I sit because awareness is already here. The hall itself seemed transformed. The air was no longer filled with the tension of monks straining to achieve. Instead, it carried the fragrance of ease. Sometimes, the sound of soft breathing filled the space like music. Sometimes, the hall was alive with silence, so natural that it felt like the earth itself was breathing with them. There is a saying in Zen, sitting quietly doing nothing, spring comes and the grass grows by itself. The monks began to live this truth. They realized that meditation was not a tool to force grass to grow, but a way of sitting with the miracle that it grows at all. Perhaps as you listen now, you can feel this same ease in yourself. You do not need to make sleep arrive. You do not need to silence every thought. Simply lie here breathing and trust that just as spring comes, unbidden rest too will come in its own time. The grass grows by itself. The breath flows by itself. Awareness is already present, holding it all. Wei, who had struggled so long, began to see this clearly. He confessed to Chen one morning, "I used to think I was failing because I could not silence my mind. Now I see that silence does not mean the absence of thought. It means noticing the awareness in which thought appears. Even when my mind is noisy, awareness is still here, like the sky that holds both clouds and sun." Chen smiled, the lines of his face soft with compassion. "Yes, Wei. You have discovered that awareness does not come and go, only your attention drifts. But the awareness that notices drifting has never left. You do not need to grasp it. You only need to trust it." There is a story of a farmer who sat beside his fields, anxious that the crops were not growing fast enough. Day after day he pulled at the stalks, trying to force them taller. But in doing so, he damaged the roots and weakened the plants. His neighbor, who simply watered and waited, saw his fields flourish in their season. Awareness, too, cannot be pulled or forced. It reveals itself when we stop tugging, when we allow life to unfold in its own rhythm. The abbot himself came to treasure this truth. For years, he had demanded silence from his mind, disciplining it as though it were a rebellious child. But now, when he sat, he felt like a parent resting beside a child, simply watching with love. Thoughts came and went, but he no longer punished them. He let them drift like clouds, trusting that beneath them the sky was always clear. Perhaps you too can rest in this trust. Imagine your mind as the sky. Clouds of thought may pass, some dark, some light, some fleeting, some heavy. You do not need to chase them away. You do not need to cling to them. Simply allow them to pass. The sky does not strain to be blue. It is already blue even when clouds obscure it. Awareness is already here, even when thoughts pass through. As the monks embraced this understanding, their days grew lighter. Meditation was no longer a duty to endure, but a gift to enter. Some sat for long hours, not because they were commanded to, but because they enjoyed resting in awareness. Others sat briefly, then carried the same presence into their work. No one measured, no one compared. Each found his own way, and in each way, awareness was honored. The monastery itself became like a great breathing body. The kitchen hummed with presence, the garden bloomed with care, the library whispered with the steady rhythm of brushes on parchment. Even laughter, once rare, rang more often in the courtyards, not as distraction, but as the natural music of monks who no longer carried the burden of becoming. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the sky turned shades of gold and violet, the abbot walked through the bamboo grove with Chen. The stalks swayed gently, their shadows long upon the ground. "I used to think," the abbot said, "that meditation was a battle, a place to conquer the mind. Now I see it is more like the bamboo. It grows because it is its nature to grow. It bends with the wind, it sways, but it does not resist. I spent my life trying to make bamboo grow straighter. Only now do I see it was always perfect. Chen bowed his head in respect. Master, you have discovered what cannot be taught with words. Presence is not something to be forced. It is the nature of what we are. Spring comes, the grass grows by itself. We are already what we seek. Perhaps you too can feel this tonight. You do not need to fix yourself. You do not need to improve this moment. Let the grass grow by itself. Let the breath move by itself. Let awareness hold you, as it always has. As the night deepens, let yourself rest in that simplicity. There is nothing to do, nothing to achieve, nothing to fix. Spring comes, the grass grows, the breath flows, the awareness remains. Rest in that ordinariness. Rest in the extraordinariness of being exactly as you are. Life in the monastery now unfolded like a quiet river, each ripple a natural expression of presence. The monks no longer separated meditation from daily tasks. Instead, they discovered that every moment could carry the fragrance of awareness. The kitchen, the garden, the library, the courtyard, each became a temple of its own, each as sacred as the meditation hall. One morning, as the mist still lingered over the hills, a group of monks rose early to prepare the community meal. The fire was lit, rice washed, vegetables chopped. The kitchen was alive, with the rhythm of work, the crackle of flames, the splash of water, the steady thud of knives against wooden boards. Yet there was no rush, no strain. Each monk moved slowly, deliberately, as if every action were a prayer. The act of stirring a pot became as profound as reciting a sutra. The fragrance of rice rising with the steam was itself a teaching, simple, nourishing, already complete. Another monk spent his mornings sweeping the courtyard. His broom traced lines across the stone floor, clearing fallen leaves. Before, he had swept quickly, treating it as a chore to finish before returning to real practice. But now each stroke of the broom was taken as practice itself. The sound of bristles against stone was like a chant, steady and soothing. The movement of his arms was like a dance, slow and unforced. He began to notice the way the wind sometimes carried leaves just as he finished sweeping, scattering them across the stones again. Once, he would have been frustrated seeing it as undoing his work. But now he smiled. The leaves returned, the broom moved again, and each moment was fresh, complete in itself. In the garden, Chen worked with the soil as he always had, but now others often joined him. Together they planted seeds, watered rows of vegetables, and tended to sprouts reaching toward the sun. They discovered that gardening itself was a meditation. The earth was cool between their fingers. The rhythm of pulling weeds and pressing soil was steady and grounding. Watching a seed sprout became a reminder that awakening too unfolds quietly without force in its own season. The saying echoed often among them. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. At first, the younger monks found it puzzling. If nothing changes, they asked, then what is the point of practice? But in time, they began to see the truth. What changed was not the task, but the way it was lived. Before, chopping wood and carrying water were burdens, means to an end. After, they were complete in themselves, expressions of presence. Perhaps you too can feel this in your own life. Think of the simplest tasks: washing a cup, folding clothes, walking to the door. These may seem ordinary, but when met with awareness, they shine with quiet beauty. You do not need to wait for special moments to touch peace. Peace is here in the ordinariness of living. Let us pause together. Imagine lifting a bucket of water from a well. The rope creaks, the bucket rises heavy in your hands. You feel the coolness of the water against your skin, the sway of the weight as you carry it. Step by step you walk aware of the ground beneath your feet. You are not rushing to finish. Each step is complete. Each drop of water is alive. In this act, nothing is missing. The abbot often reminded them, awakening is not about changing what you do, but about changing how you see. When you are aware, even sweeping leaves or stirring rice becomes the practice. The task itself does not matter. What matters is the presence you bring to it. Wei, who had once carried such restlessness, found unexpected peace in chopping wood. At first he had dreaded the task, the sweat, the strain, the endless repetition. But one day, as he raised the axe and brought it down, he noticed the sound of the blade striking the feel of wood, splitting the scent of pine released into the air. Each strike became a rhythm, each log a teacher. The work no longer felt heavy. It became a song of presence, steady and alive. One evening, after a long day of tasks, Wei sat with Chen under the stars. "Brother," he said, "I think I finally understand the meaning of chopping wood and carrying water. It is not about the task itself. It is about being awake in it. Before I thought awakening meant escaping the ordinary. Now I see that awakening is the ordinary, fully lived." Chen smiled, his eyes glimmering in the starlight. "Yes, Wei. The miracle is not to walk on water or fly in the sky. The miracle is to walk on the earth, to carry water, to live fully in each moment." Perhaps as you hear this, you can let go of the idea that your peace must be found in extraordinary moments. Let this moment be enough. The feel of your body resting, the rhythm of your breath, the awareness that holds it all. This is already the practice. You do not need to reach for more. The monastery, in its simple routines, became a place of quiet miracles. Not miracles of spectacle, but miracles of presence. The miracle of laughter rising with the sound of chopping vegetables. The miracle of leaves falling and being swept only to fall again. The miracle of monks walking slowly beneath the moon, each step an act of awareness. And as you rest now, perhaps you can let your own life be seen as miraculous in its ordinariness. You do not need to chase distant awakenings. You do not need to demand extraordinary signs. Awareness is here, breathing with you, holding you. Chop wood, carry water. Breathe in, breathe out. Rest and know that nothing is missing. Visitors continued to arrive at the monastery, drawn by whispers of the monk who had refused to meditate and yet seemed to embody a peace that radiated without effort. They expected to find him in the meditation hall, seated in dignified silence like a statue. Instead, more often than not, they found him in the garden. His robe was streaked with soil, his hands roughened by earth, his face calm as he bent to pull weeds or water tender shoots. Some visitors were puzzled, even disappointed. "Is this the enlightened monk we traveled so far to see?" they whispered among themselves. "He works like a farmer. Where is the aura of holiness, the air of mystery?" Yet when they drew closer, something about Chen's presence unsettled their expectations. It was not that he seemed extraordinary. It was that he seemed so ordinary, so natural. And in that ordinariness there was a depth they could not explain. One afternoon, a scholar from a distant province approached him. The scholar had studied countless sutras, memorized verses, and debated philosophy in temples across the land. He bowed stiffly and asked, "Master Chen, I have traveled far to learn the essence of the way. Tell me, what is the highest teaching?" Chen brushed soil from his hands, stood slowly, and looked at the scholar with gentle eyes. "The highest teaching," he said, "is this: the sage does nothing yet. Nothing is left undone." The scholar frowned. "Those words are from Lao Tzu," he replied quickly. "But surely you mean that the sage acts in secret in ways too subtle for us to see. Surely there is some hidden technique." Chen shook his head softly. "Number. It means exactly what it says. When you stop forcing, life flows as it must. The breath breathes itself. The grass grows by itself. The sun rises and sets without your command. Awareness is here without your effort. When you cease grasping, everything is already done. The scholar left bewildered, muttering to himself, but the villagers who had overheard his words felt a strange lightness in their hearts. They returned home, carrying not a new method, but a new trust. That perhaps life did not need to be so difficult. That perhaps peace was not something to wrestle from existence, but something to allow. Perhaps as you listen now you can feel this too. Notice your breath. You do not command it to rise and fall, yet it does. Notice the body held gently by the bed, supported without effort. You do not order your heart to beat, yet it continues. The sage does nothing yet. Nothing is left undone. Let this truth soften you. You do not need to make rest happen. You only need to allow it to arrive. The abbot, who often watched Chen from a distance, found himself reflecting on this teaching. For years he had believed that without control, chaos would reign. But he began to see that order arises naturally when it is not forced. The monks worked together with more harmony now, not because of stricter rules, but because each task was met with presence. The kitchen remained clean, the garden thrived, the hall was tended, all without the strain of compulsion. He remembered his own life of discipline and realized how often he had forced the stalks to grow. Yet here was Chen tending the garden with no urgency, and everything flourished. He realized that Lao Tzu's words were not mystical poetry, but a description of the very rhythm of life. There is a story of a man who tried to make a river flow faster. He dug channels, moved stones, pushed against the current with all his might. But the river resisted, swirling in confusion. Finally exhausted, he stepped aside, and the river flowed smoothly on its own. The man realized that the river had always known where to go. His effort had only created turbulence. So it is with the mind, with the heart, with life itself. The more we force, the more turbulent it becomes. But when we release, everything flows as it should. Wei, who often joined Chen in the garden, asked him one day, "Brother, do you mean we should do nothing at all? Should we abandon our duties, our practices, our responsibilities?" Chen smiled, lifting a watering jar and tilting it gently over the soil. "Do you see? The jar is lifted, the water flows, the plants drink. Nothing is forced, yet nothing is left undone. Doing without forcing is not idleness. It is harmony with what already island." Wei nodded slowly, feeling the truth, but not yet fully able to live it. He was still learning to trust that life could carry him without his constant grasping. Perhaps you too wrestle with this, the habit of control, the fear that if you stop striving, everything will fall apart. But tonight, as you rest, you can let go for a while. Trust that the breath will carry you, the body will rest, the earth will turn. You do not need to hold it all together. You can release, and still nothing will be left undone. The monastery grew quieter in a new way. Tasks were still completed, sutras still recited, meals still prepared. But now each was done with ease, without the tightness of strain. The monks discovered that when they allowed life to flow, work no longer felt like work. It became living, and living itself was meditation. Chen continued to embody this truth, never declaring himself a teacher, never claiming authority. Yet his very presence was a lesson. Villagers who met him returned home feeling lighter. Monks who worked beside him found themselves calmer. Even the abbot, once stern and rigid, now walked with softer steps. As the sun set each evening, the garden often glowed in golden light, and Chen could be seen among the plants, his figure humble yet radiant. Those who saw him sometimes felt they were witnessing something miraculous. But Chen would say, there is nothing miraculous here. It is simply life lived as it island. The sage does nothing yet. Nothing is left undone. And so the monastery thrived, not through greater effort, but through less. Not through harder striving, but through softer being. As you listen now, let this truth cradle you. You do not need to finish the day perfectly. You do not need to resolve every thought before sleep. You do not need to fix yourself. Rest as the sage rests. Do nothing, and yet let everything be done. The garden became the quiet heart of the monastery. While the meditation hall still held its solemn rows of cushions and the library its countless scrolls, it was often among the rows of vegetables and flowers that visitors felt the deepest teaching. Chen could be found there. Most days his robes stained with earth, his hands weathered from digging, his movements unhurried. He bent to the soil with the same reverence. Others bowed before statues, as if each leaf and sprout were a sutra of its own. More seekers began to travel from distant villages and cities. Some came carrying scrolls tucked under their arms, hoping to test the monk with difficult questions. Others arrived weary from their lives, seeking comfort more than knowledge. And many, though they could not name it, came because they had heard of a peace that radiated from this place, a peace they longed to feel within themselves. One man arrived after a long journey through mountains. His face was gaunt, his eyes tired, his clothes dusty from travel. When he finally stood before Chen, he bowed deeply and said, "Master, I have been searching for many years. I have studied every text, tried every technique, followed every instruction given to me, and yet I feel as far from peace as I did when I began. Please, show me the way." Chen looked at him with gentle compassion. "What is it that you are seeking?" "Awareness," the man answered quickly. "The stillness of mind, the awakening of truth." Chen tilted his head. "And are you not aware of your seeking right now?" The man hesitated, unsure. "Yes, but it is not the true awareness. I am looking for something deeper." Chen smiled softly. "You are like the man who lost his spectacles." He searched his house, tore apart his shelves, turned his mats upside down, and searched the ground again and again. Exhausted, he sat down to rest, and only then did a neighbor point to his forehead. The spectacles had been there all along. The man blinked, stunned. "Are you saying I already have what I am looking for?" Chen nodded. "The very awareness that notices your restlessness is the awareness you seek. You cannot lose it. You cannot be apart from it. You have only convinced yourself it must be somewhere else." The man lowered his gaze, his heart trembling. All the years of effort, the endless striving, the burden of failure, could it be that none of it had ever been necessary? He wanted to resist the simplicity, but a deeper part of him felt the truth in Chen's words. Tears welled in his eyes, and he whispered, "So I was searching for what had never left me." Perhaps, as you listen now, you can feel the same truth. Notice your breath. Notice your body resting. Notice the thoughts moving through your mind. The awareness that sees them has always been here. You cannot lose it. You do not need to chase it. It is the spectacles already resting upon your forehead. There is a Zen koan that asks, "Who is it that drags this corpse around?" It points not to the body or the mind, but to the awareness that knows them both. The awareness that is never born and never dies, that holds every breath, every sensation, every thought without effort. The man who had traveled so far remained in the garden long after his conversation with Chen. He did not rush back to the meditation hall or open his scrolls again. He simply sat on the grass, feeling the earth beneath him, the sun warming his face, the sound of birds filling the air. For the first time in decades, he was not seeking. He was simply being. and in that being he felt the peace he had longed for all his life. The other monks watched from a distance. Some smiled, for they knew the moment well, the gentle collapse of striving, the surrender into what had always been. Others still wrestled with their own habits of effort, but even they felt something stir within them, a reminder that the way was not far away. The abbot too witnessed this transformation. He remembered his own years of searching, the countless hours spent forcing his mind into stillness, the pain of discipline carried like a badge. Now, seeing the traveler's relief, he felt once more the quiet truth that awakening is not a prize at the end of a path, but the ground beneath every step. Perhaps you too have spent much of your life searching for peace, for love, for certainty, for rest. Perhaps you have tried countless ways hoping to finally arrive. But tonight, as you lie here, let yourself notice that the awareness of this searching has never left you. The very one who longs is already the awareness that holds longing. There is nothing to find. There is only to notice. Let us pause together. Close your eyes more deeply. Feel the sheets against your skin, the weight of the body sinking into rest. Hear the rhythm of your breath moving without command. Do not look for peace as if it were hidden. Simply notice that awareness is here, already holding this moment. The traveler eventually bowed to Chen again and whispered, "Thank you, Master, for showing me what was never lost." Then he left, carrying not a new technique or secret teaching, but a quiet recognition. And that recognition would stay with him not as an achievement, but as a gentle remembering, like touching his own forehead and finding the spectacles that had been there all along. The monks who saw this encounter spoke of it for weeks, not because Chen had revealed something extraordinary, but because he had reminded them of the most ordinary truth, that the awareness they sought was always already here. As the night deepens around you, rest in this reminder. You do not need to search anymore. You do not need to strive. Awareness is here, as close as your own breath, as constant as your own heartbeat. It has never left you. It will never leave you. Rest in that knowing. Rest as the traveler finally rested, no longer chasing, no longer searching, simply being. The traveler who discovered that his long search had been for what was never lost, left the monastery with lighter steps. He carried no new scrolls, no secret instructions, only a smile that rose quietly from within him. Those who met him on the road wondered what had changed, for his face, once drawn with tension, now seemed to glow with ease. He did not speak of methods or techniques. He simply said, "I was searching for my shadow until I realized it had never left me." In the days that followed, other seekers came, each carrying their own burdens of striving. Some had spent decades meditating, others had studied countless scriptures. Still, others had tried to mold their lives into perfection, believing peace would come when all was arranged just right. They came with furrowed brows and weary hearts, and each hoped Chen would give them the missing piece that would complete their journey. One afternoon, as the sun bent low and the sky turned shades of amber, a young man approached Chen in the garden. His voice trembled with frustration. "Master, I feel as though I am always chasing peace. It is there for a moment, like sunlight breaking through clouds, and then it slips away. I run after it, but the faster I chase, the faster it disappears. What am I doing wrong?" Chen placed his hoe gently upon the soil and looked at the young man with calm eyes. "Have you ever seen a man running in circles trying to catch his own shadow?" The young man frowned. "Yes, but that is foolish. The shadow is always with him. He cannot catch it by running." Chen smiled. "And yet that is what you are doing with peace. You chase it as if it were separate when it has never left you. The more you run, the further it seems. But when you stop, you find that it was with you all along." The young man's eyes widened as tears rose unbidden. He sank to the ground, his hands covering his face. For years, he had exhausted himself chasing what could not be caught, only to discover that the one who was chasing was already the peace he sought. Perhaps you too have felt this in your life, chasing happiness, searching for rest, striving for wholeness. Perhaps you have believed it was always just beyond your reach, waiting in tomorrow, hidden in some future moment. Yet tonight, as you lie here, notice that the very awareness of your longing is already whole. The shadow has never left you. Let us pause together. Imagine yourself running beneath the sun, desperate to catch your shadow. Notice how it always slips ahead, never quite within reach. Now, imagine stopping. You breathe. You rest. You look down, and there it is beneath your feet, where it has always been. In the same way, you do not need to chase peace. You need only to stop running. The young man who heard Chen's words sat in silence for a long while. He felt the breeze move across his face, smelled the fragrance of earth and pine, and for the first time in many years he stopped trying. And in that stopping, he discovered what had always been present, a peace that was not created but revealed. The other monks who witnessed this were reminded once more of their own journeys. They remembered the countless ways they had tried to grasp awakening, through effort, through control, through endless striving. And they too saw that awareness was not something to be attained, but something to be recognized. Wei, who had been Chen's closest companion through these years, reflected deeply on this. One evening, as they walked together by the pond, he asked, "Brother, why do we cling so stubbornly to the chase? Even when we know the shadow cannot be caught, we still run. Even when we hear the truth, we forget it again. Why?" Chen looked at the reflection of the moon upon the water. Because the mind is restless by nature, always reaching, always wanting. It is like a child running through a marketplace, dazzled by sights and sounds. But the awareness that knows this restlessness is not restless. That awareness is your true nature. The chase belongs to the mind, but you are the sky in which the chase unfolds. Wei listened, his heart trembling. He realized that even his doubts, even his constant striving, were already held within awareness. He did not need to stop them forcefully. He only needed to recognize that the one who saw them was already free. Perhaps you too can rest in this truth. Notice your thoughts, however busy they may be. Notice your feelings, however heavy they may seem. They are like the child in the marketplace, running and reaching. But the awareness that notices them is like the vast sky, unmoved, spacious, already complete. There is a teaching that says, "The enlightenment you are seeking is the awareness that is seeking." The one who longs for peace is already the peace itself. The one who seeks rest is already held by rest. The one who strives for awakening is already awake. The young man who had cried in the garden left the monastery the next morning, but not with disappointment. He carried no new instructions, no secret methods, but he carried a new way of seeing. As he walked down the mountain path, he no longer rushed. He felt the ground beneath his feet, the wind against his face, the sun warming his back. And in each step he realized he was no longer chasing his shadow. He was walking with it. The monks watched him go and smiled. They knew his journey was not finished, but he had glimpsed the truth that would guide him wherever he went. As you rest tonight, let this truth guide you too. You do not need to chase peace into tomorrow. You do not need to grasp at awakening as if it were hidden. The awareness that knows your longing is already here. Stop running, and you will see it has never left you. Breathe gently. Rest deeply. Let the shadow of your being rest beneath you, faithful, constant, inseparable. You are already what you seek. The monastery had by now become a place where seekers arrived, not for rigid instruction, but for a kind of remembering. They came with questions, with doubts, with the weight of their striving. And more often than not, they left not with answers, but with a softer gaze, a quieter heart, and the realization that what they sought had never been absent. The monks themselves began to notice something remarkable. Ordinary awareness, the simple act of being, no longer felt ordinary at all. To notice a breath rising and falling, to feel sunlight warming the skin, to hear the sound of rain tapping against roof tiles. These things shimmered with a kind of quiet extraordinariness. What they had once overlooked as too plain, too common, was now revealed as sacred. Wei felt this one evening as he sat by the pond. He had spent many years struggling, many nights turning in frustration, many days doubting whether he would ever taste peace. But now, as he sat watching the moon reflected in the water, he felt a stillness so natural that it seemed almost unbelievable. He whispered to himself, "All this time, I searched for what was already here." His tears fell into the pond, and the ripples seemed to carry his realization outward into the night. Chen joined him quietly, and they sat together in silence. After a while, Wei asked, "Brother, how can something so ordinary, simply sitting, simply breathing, feel so extraordinary? Have I been blind all these years?" Chen smiled gently. "It is not blindness, Wei. It is habit. We have been trained to overlook what is closest, to dismiss what is simple. We think truth must be hidden far away, difficult to reach. But the extraordinary has always been in the ordinary. You are like a man who dips a cup into the ocean, marvels at the water he holds, and forgets that the ocean is everywhere." Wei's eyes widened, and Chen continued, "Rumi once said, 'You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop.' Awareness is like that. Each breath, each moment, each ordinary act contains the whole of the extraordinary. But because it is so close, we fail to notice. Perhaps you too have felt this, dismissing the simple moments as insignificant while chasing grand experiences. But tonight, as you lie here, notice the miracle of breath entering your body. Notice the way your chest rises and falls unbidden, alive. Notice the awareness that sees this moment. This is not ordinary. This is the entire ocean reflected in a single drop." Let us pause together. Imagine holding a small glass of water in your hand. At first it seems like nothing, clear, simple, ordinary. But as you look closely, you see it reflects the sky, the sun, the world. It is not separate from the vast ocean. In the same way, your awareness in this very moment is not small. It is the whole of being reflected here now, within you. The monks began to live with this recognition. No task was too small, no act too plain. Washing rice became extraordinary. Sweeping leaves became extraordinary. Even the simple act of walking across the courtyard carried a new radiance. They were no longer seeking something beyond. They were meeting the extraordinary in what had always been before their eyes. The abbot, once stern, now often paused to watch the sun rise over the hills. He told the monks, "For 50 years I thought I had to reach for enlightenment. Now I see it rises like the sun, not because I command it, but because it is its nature. Each dawn is enough. Each breath is enough." One day, a group of villagers asked Chen, "Master, why do you not teach us the secrets of meditation, the hidden practices that lead to awakening?" Chen laughed softly, brushing soil from his hands. "What could be more secret than this moment? What could be more hidden than what is always in front of you? You breathe and you think it is ordinary, but it is the miracle of life itself. You see the sky and you think it is common, but it is infinity stretching before you. Do not seek hidden treasures. Look at what is here. This is the treasure." The villagers looked up at the sky, felt the ground beneath their feet, and for a moment they too saw what Chen meant. Perhaps you too can see this tonight. You may think your day was ordinary, filled with simple tasks, filled with nothing special. But what is more extraordinary than the fact that you are alive, breathing, listening, resting in this very moment? You do not need to wait for fireworks or miracles. The miracle is here in the ordinariness that holds you. There is a Zen story of a monk who asked his teacher, "What is Buddha?" The teacher replied, "This very mind." The monk was puzzled. How could something so plain be Buddha? But later, he realized that Buddha was not something to find elsewhere. It was the awareness in which all things appear. The very mind, noticing the question. The very awareness, listening now. Wei, reflecting on this, said to Chen, "I used to dream of visions of special states of great revelations, but now I see that the greatest revelation is that I am already aware. Nothing more is needed." Chen nodded. "Yes, Wei. The ocean is in every drop. The extraordinary is in every breath. Enlightenment is not another world. It is the fullness of this one seen without grasping. As the night deepens, let this truth be your comfort. You do not need to search for extraordinary visions. You do not need to chase distant awakenings. Rest in the miracle of the ordinary, the breath, the body, the awareness that hears these words. Within them, the entire ocean of life is already reflected. Close your eyes more deeply now. Feel the rhythm of breathing. Know that in each breath the vastness of being is present. You are not a small drop lost in the ocean. You are the ocean alive in this drop of awareness. Rest in that ocean. Rest in the extraordinary that shines quietly in the ordinary. The monks often gathered in the courtyard after their morning chores, letting the sun warm their shoulders and the breeze stir their robes. There was no need for discussion, no need for lectures. Simply sitting together, present, was enough. And yet sometimes questions still arose like ripples upon a still pond. One morning, a young novice who had recently arrived approached the abbot. His eyes were wide with both innocence and urgency. Bowing deeply, he asked, "Master, what is Buddha?" The abbot looked at him for a long moment. The courtyard was filled with the sounds of sparrows, the distant clang of a pot from the kitchen, the laughter of children from a nearby village. Then he answered, "This very mind is Buddha." The novice blinked, confused. "But Master," he said, "my mind is full of restlessness, of desires, of wandering thoughts." "How can that be Buddha?" The abbot smiled gently. "Your restlessness appears within awareness. Your desires rise and fall within awareness. Your wandering thoughts drift through awareness. That awareness itself is Buddha. Do not mistake the clouds for the sky. The sky is always present, no matter what drifts across it." The novice bowed again, still puzzled but also strangely comforted. Later, as he swept the courtyard, he repeated the words to himself, "This very mind is Buddha." The broom scratched against the stone, the leaves scattered in the breeze, and slowly he began to understand. It was not about changing his mind into something pure and silent. It was about recognizing the awareness that had always been here, quietly holding even the noise. Perhaps you too have asked, what is peace? What is awakening? Perhaps you have believed it must be something other than what you know now. But pause for a moment. Notice your breath. Notice the body resting. Notice the awareness that hears these words. That awareness is already complete. This very mind is Buddha. Wei, who often wrestled with his own doubts, overheard the exchange. Later he sat with Chen by the pond and said, "Brother, I want to believe this teaching, but sometimes my thoughts are so heavy, my distractions so strong that I cannot see how my mind could ever be Buddha." Chen picked up a small twig and tossed it gently into the water. They watched as it floated, carried by ripples drifting slowly across the pond. Wei Chen said softly, "The twig floats, but the pond remains. Thoughts drift, but awareness remains." Buddha is not the twig. Buddha is the pond. Wei lowered his eyes, tears welling. So even my distractions are not outside awareness. Chen nodded. Even distraction is already held by awareness. You do not need to destroy it. You only need to notice that the one who sees it is already free. Perhaps as you hear this, you can feel the same comfort. Your mind may be busy, filled with thoughts, worries, memories, but beneath them, awareness remains still, spacious, unbroken. You do not need to chase away the thoughts. You only need to rest, as the pond rests, holding them gently as they drift by. There is another story told in Zen. A monk once asked his teacher, "What is the way?" The teacher replied, "The ordinary mind is the way." The monk was confused. "But if it is ordinary, how can it be the way?" the teacher said. "Because the way is not about becoming special. It is about meeting this moment exactly as it island." The monks began to live with this understanding. They no longer treated their minds as enemies to be conquered. Instead, they treated awareness as a friend who had always been with them, patiently waiting. Whether their minds were restless or calm, they trusted that awareness remained unchanged. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, the abbot spoke to the community. "For many years," he said, "I believed I had to purify my mind, to carve away every thought, to shape myself into something worthy. Now I see that the mind as it is already Buddha. Awareness is not something to gain. It is what we are. Each breath, each step, each moment is already the way." The monks listened, their hearts opening to the simplicity of his words. Some smiled. Others felt tears rise. And in that gathering, they realized again that the extraordinary was hidden within the ordinary, waiting only to be noticed. Perhaps you too can rest in this. You do not need to improve this moment. You do not need to fix your thoughts before you are worthy of peace. The very awareness that sees your mind just as it is already complete. This very mind is Buddha. Let us pause once more. Close your eyes gently. Feel the body heavy against the bed, the breath moving without effort. Notice the thoughts drifting like twigs upon a pond. Notice that beneath them, awareness remains vast, calm, embracing. This very mind, just as it is the way. The novice, who first asked the question, continued to practice with new eyes. When he swept the courtyard, when he ate his rice, when he bowed in the hall, he whispered to himself, "This very mind is Buddha." At first it was a phrase, a reminder, but in time it became a recognition, a living truth. And so, the monastery deepened in its ease. No longer a place of striving, it became a place of simple presence. Each monk discovered again and again that awakening was not a distant prize, but the ordinariness of their own awareness. As you drift into rest, let this be your comfort too. You do not need to change who you are to find peace. The very awareness that hears these words is already enough. The sky does not need to clear to be sky. The pond does not need to be still to hold the moon. This very mind, with all its ripples, with all its clouds, is already Buddha. Rest in that truth. Rest in the miracle of this moment, exactly as it island. The reputation of the monastery continued to spread beyond the mountains, carried by merchants, travelers, and pilgrims. Stories circulated of monks who seemed at peace even while sweeping leaves, of an abbot whose stern face had softened into quiet smiles, and of a simple gardener monk who spoke as though he were reminding people of something they had always known. Visitors arrived in greater numbers, each bringing their questions and their hopes. Many carried within them the same belief that enlightenment was hidden behind some secret method, a technique locked away like a jewel waiting for the right key. They came asking for formulas, for step-by-step instructions, for mantras that would guarantee awakening. One afternoon, a group of visitors gathered in the meditation hall. The air smelled faintly of incense and sunlight streamed through the lattice windows, painting patterns across the wooden floor. They bowed before Chen, who had been asked by the abbot to speak with them. "Master," one man began, "we have read of your peace, of how you embody awakening, even without sitting for long hours. Please tell us, what method should we practice? What technique will take us to enlightenment?" Chen was silent for a time, his gaze resting softly on the patterns of light upon the floor. Then he spoke slowly, his voice calm as flowing water. "Have you heard the story of the finger pointing at the moon?" The visitors looked at one another, shaking their heads. "A teacher once pointed to the full moon in the night sky," Chen said. But his students, instead of looking up, fixed their eyes on his finger. They argued over its shape, its length, its direction, believing that if they studied it carefully enough, they would see the moon. Yet all the while, the moon shone brightly above them, waiting. The finger was never the moon. It was only a pointer. He looked at the visitors kindly. "So it is with methods, with techniques, with teachings. They are fingers pointing to the moon. Do not mistake the finger for the moon. Do not cling to the practice and forget what it reveals. The moon is awareness itself, already shining, already whole. If you keep staring at the finger, you will miss the light that has always been above you." The visitors listened, some frowning, others looking down in thought. One woman asked, "But if there were no finger, how would we know where to look? Do we not need the method to guide us?" Chen nodded gently. "Yes. The finger is useful, but only if you remember what it is for. If practice helps you notice awareness, then practice. But do not worship the practice. Do not confuse the means with the truth itself. Once you see the moon, you no longer need to cling to the finger. Perhaps as you listen, you too can feel this truth. Techniques, routines, rituals, they are not wrong. They are helpful, but they are not the peace you seek. Peace is already here, shining above, waiting to be noticed. Your breath moving now, without effort, is already the moon. Your awareness, listening now in stillness, is already the light. Let us pause together. Imagine a clear night sky. The stars sparkle, the air is cool, and the moon shines full and bright. Now, imagine someone pointing toward it. Do you keep staring at their finger, or do you lift your eyes and see the moon? In this moment, let your awareness be the moon, not something to reach for, but something already shining, already whole. The abbot, who had been listening quietly, added his own reflection. For many years I mistook the finger for the moon. I believed that more discipline, more methods, more hours would bring me to enlightenment. And yet, the more I clung to the finger, the more the moon seemed hidden. Only when I released my grasp did I finally see what had always been there. The visitors felt the weight of his words. Some still resisted, longing for a clear set of instructions, something to grasp. But others began to sense the depth of what they were hearing. The idea that awakening was already present, that it did not need to be earned, unsettled them, yet also filled them with quiet relief. Wei, who stood among the monks, remembered his own years of clinging to methods of counting each breath as though it were a step toward freedom. He smiled softly, realizing that he too had stared at the finger for so long, only to discover that the moon had always been shining. Perhaps you too have clung to fingers, to routines, to goals, to the belief that peace lies just beyond reach. Yet tonight, as you rest, you can lift your gaze. Notice your breath, your body, your awareness. This is the moon. This is the light. You do not need to cling to the finger anymore. After the visitors departed, the monks spoke quietly among themselves. Some had grown fond of certain practices, chanting, sitting, bowing. Others found peace in sweeping or cooking. But now they saw that none of these were the moon itself. Each was only a pointer, a finger in the night. The true teaching was not in the practice, but in the recognition of awareness that the practice revealed. One monk, while sweeping leaves from the courtyard, whispered to himself, "This broom is my finger, the sweep is my practice. But the awareness watching it all is the moon. May I never mistake one for the other." As the days passed, the monastery lived more fully in this understanding. The monks still practiced, but lightly, without the heavy weight of expectation. And in their lightness they found joy. They found that when the finger was released, the moon filled the sky. As you drift deeper into rest, remember this too. You do not need to cling to methods or chase after perfection. Awareness is here shining like the moon in a clear night sky. Rest beneath that light. Rest in what has always been present. As the visitors departed and the hall grew quiet again, the monks returned to their daily rhythms. Yet the conversation about fingers and moons lingered in their hearts. They began to notice how easily the mind clings, not just to techniques, but to ideas, to goals, even to the subtle hope of becoming something more. Again and again, Chen reminded them that awakening was not a special state waiting at the end of striving. It was the recognition of the sacredness already present in the ordinary. One afternoon, as the sky filled with soft drifting clouds, a villager arrived carrying a small bundle. She had heard of Chen's teaching and wished to test him. Placing the bundle upon the stone table in the garden, she unwrapped it to reveal a delicate porcelain cup painted with faint blue flowers. "Master," she said, "I have brought you this cup. Tell me, what is enlightenment?" Chen lifted the cup gently into his hands. He traced the rim with his finger, held it up to the light, then poured water from a nearby jar. He placed the cup before her and said, "Drink." The woman frowned. "You evade my question. I asked about enlightenment, not about tea." Chen smiled softly. "This cup is enlightenment. The act of lifting it is enlightenment. The water filling it is enlightenment. The drinking of it is enlightenment. There is no separation. Enlightenment is not something beyond the cup, beyond the water, beyond the act. It is this moment, lived in full awareness." The woman's brows softened as she sipped. The cool water touched her lips, flowed across her tongue, eased her thirst. For the first time she noticed its taste, as if it were new. Her eyes widened slightly. She bowed deeply, understanding without words. "Perhaps you too can feel this. Whatever is before you, now the sound of your breath, the weight of your body against the bed, the awareness that notices it all. This is the cup, this is the water, this is enlightenment. You do not need to wait for extraordinary visions. The sacred is here, in the act of noticing what island. There is a story of a master who welcomed a guest into his home. The guest asked for teachings, for lofty truths and hidden wisdom. The master poured tea into the guest's cup, and then kept pouring until it overflowed, spilling onto the table. The guest cried out, "Stop, the cup is full." The master replied, "So too is your mind, full of ideas, expectations, and seeking. Until you empty it, how can you taste what is already here?" The monks recalled this story often. They realized how full their own minds had been with desires for progress, with measurements of success, with the need to become something more. Now they began to empty those cups, not by force, but by letting go of the need to fill them. In emptiness they discovered presence. Wei especially found this lesson touching. One evening, while serving rice to his brothers in the hall, he noticed the way each grain caught the lamplight, the way steam curled upward like incense. He whispered to himself, "Each grain is a teaching, each scoop is enough." For years, he had thought, enlightenment was far away. Now he tasted it in the simplest act of serving rice. Perhaps you can imagine this too. Picture a cup of tea warm in your hands. Feel the smooth porcelain against your skin, the rising steam against your face. Take a slow sip, noticing the flavor as it spreads across your tongue. In that moment, nothing is missing. Awareness, tea, body, breath, all are one. That is awakening. The abbot, who had lived through decades of striving, shared his reflection with the monks one night. I once thought enlightenment was a mountain peak, reached only after endless climbing. Now I see it is the path itself, every step, every breath, every act. It is not hidden in the extraordinary. It is the sacredness of the ordinary. A cup of tea, a grain of rice, the sweep of a broom. This is enough. The monks nodded, their hearts at ease. Some laughed softly, realizing how long they had overlooked what was right before them. Others felt tears rise, as though they were returning home after a long journey. Perhaps as you rest tonight, you too can release the need for grand revelations. Notice the breath. Notice the weight of the body sinking deeper. Notice the awareness that embraces it all. This is the cup. This is the tea. This is the sacred here and now. One of the villagers who had witnessed the tea lesson later told her friends, "I asked for enlightenment, and the master gave me water." I realized then that enlightenment was not in the answer, but in the drinking. Her words spread quietly, touching many hearts, reminding them that they did not need to wait for distant miracles. They only needed to notice the miracle of this moment. And so, the monastery became known not for rigid practices or elaborate ceremonies, but for its simplicity. Visitors would often leave saying, "I came searching for the extraordinary, but I discovered the extraordinary hidden in the ordinary." The monks themselves carried this lesson in every act. They washed dishes with awareness, folded robes with care, greeted each other with presence. Each act became a meditation, each moment a reminder. As the night deepens and your body grows heavier, let this truth settle into you too. You do not need to wait for a special state. You do not need to search for hidden answers. The sacredness of life is here in your breath, in your awareness, in the ordinariness of this very moment. Rest in that sacredness. Rest as though holding a simple cup, drinking deeply of what has always been present. In the weeks that followed, more seekers arrived at the monastery, each with the same quiet hope that Chen would reveal the secret they had long been missing. Some came weary from the burden of daily life, others from years of spiritual striving. Still, others from the ache of not knowing who they truly were. And though their faces were different, their longing was the same: to feel whole, to feel at peace, to return home to themselves. One afternoon, as the sun shimmered across the leaves of the bamboo grove, a small group gathered around Chen while he worked in the garden. His hands moved gently through the soil, pulling weeds, patting earth around the roots of young plants. When at last he paused, one of the seekers asked, "Master, please tell us, what must we do to become enlightened?" Chen looked up, his eyes calm as a still lake. He studied the seeker for a moment, then said softly, "You remind me of a fish searching for water." The group looked puzzled. "A fish?" the seeker asked. "Yes," Chen replied. "Imagine a fish swimming through the ocean, restless and desperate. It searches endlessly, asking every creature it meets, 'Where is water? Where can I find the water that will save me?' All the while it swims surrounded by the very thing it seeks. Its search blinds it to what is already everywhere." The seeker's eyes filled with tears. "So you mean enlightenment is not something we must become?" Chen placed his palm gently against the earth. "You cannot become what you already are. Awareness is here now, holding every thought, every breath, every heartbeat. The only illusion is that you must chase it. When the fish stops searching, It discovers it has never left the water. The group fell into silence, the sound of the wind through bamboo filling the air. Some resisted the simplicity, still clinging to the belief that they must earn awakening through effort. Others felt their hearts soften, realizing for the first time that perhaps nothing had ever been missing. Perhaps as you hear this story, you can feel its truth in your own life. How often have you chased peace as though it were somewhere else, in tomorrow, in success, in the approval of others, in the completion of tasks? How often have you longed for what was already holding you all along? Awareness is the water. You are the fish. You cannot be outside of it. Let us pause together. Imagine yourself as a fish gliding through a vast shimmering ocean. For a long time, you are restless, searching desperately for water, not realizing you are already surrounded. Then in a moment of stillness, you stop. You feel the coolness against your scales, the waves carrying you, the boundless expanse around you. You realize you have been home all along. Rest now, as the fish rests in the ocean. Wei, listening nearby, felt these words pierce him deeply. For years he had been like the fish, swimming tirelessly in search of something that had never been absent. He turned to Chen and whispered, "Brother, if this is true, then all my years of effort, all my striving, all my failures, were they meaningless?" Chen shook his head gently. "Not meaningless, Wei. They were the swimming of the fish. Even in its searching, it was still in the water. Your striving, your effort, your struggle, they too were held by awareness. Awakening does not erase your journey. It reveals that the water was with you all along." Wei closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. He felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the years spent blind, relief for the truth that he had never been separate. There is a story from the Zen tradition of a monk who asked his master, "What is the way?" The master replied, "The way is your everyday mind." The monk was confused, expecting something profound, something hidden. But later, as he ate his rice, swept the floor, and breathed his breath, he realized that each act was already the way. Nothing had been missing. The abbot, who stood quietly in the background, reflected on Chen's words too. He remembered his own decades of teaching, urging monks to strive to discipline themselves, to fight for awakening. And yet here was a truth that made those years feel both heavy and light. Heavy because he had overlooked what was so simple. Light because he now saw that even his discipline, even his errors, had been held within the same awareness. Like the fish, he too had been swimming in water all along. Perhaps you can rest in this comfort tonight. You do not need to regret your struggles, your mistakes, your striving. They were all part of the ocean too. The water has never left you. The awareness that knows your thoughts, your fears, your longings, has always been here, holding you without condition. Let your breath move gently now. Feel the way it enters, the way it leaves. Notice how it does so without your command, like waves rising and falling in the ocean. You are not outside of awareness. You never have been. As the sun dipped lower and shadows lengthened across the garden, the seekers bowed to Chen. One whispered, "So, enlightenment is not to become something new, but to remember what we already are." Chen nodded. "Yes. And when you remember, even for a moment, you laugh at the years you spent searching. Like the fish who suddenly sees the ocean, you wonder how you ever believed it could be missing." That night, as the monks prepared for rest, the air of the monastery felt especially light. Laughter rose softly among them, not from mockery but from recognition, the laughter of fish who realized they had always been swimming. And as you close your eyes tonight, let yourself laugh gently too. Not at failure, not at effort, but at the sweet simplicity of what has always been true. You are already in the water. You are already home. Rest now, as the fish rests in the ocean of awareness. The next morning the monastery stirred with its usual rhythm, the clang of the bell echoing across the hills, the soft shuffle of robes along stone pathways, the scent of rice rising from the kitchen. But something felt lighter in the air, as though the laughter from the night before still lingered like dew clinging to blades of grass. Wei carried buckets of water from the well to the garden. The task was one he had performed countless times, yet today it felt different. He noticed the weight of the buckets, the sound of water sloshing the way the sunlight glimmered on its surface. He paused to catch his breath and looked down into one of the buckets. To his surprise, the moon, pale in the morning sky, was reflected in the rippling water. He stood very still, staring at that image. The moon above, vast and distant, appeared again in the trembling bucket at his side. He hurried to Chen, who was kneeling among the plants, and exclaimed, "Brother, the moon is in my bucket." Chen looked up and smiled. "The moon is in every bucket, Wei. It is reflected in every river, every pond, every drop of water. Yet the moon itself is unchanged, untouched by the waters that hold its image." Wei's eyes widened. "Then our awareness is like the moon." "Yes," Chen said gently. "Awareness reflects itself in every mind, in every thought, in every experience. Sometimes the water is clear and the reflection is steady. Sometimes the water is disturbed and the reflection trembles. But the moon itself does not waver. You're striving, you're forgetting your distractions. These are ripples in the water. But the awareness that is reflected is never broken. It shines the same whether the water is still or stirred." Wei lowered his gaze, tears slipping down his face. "So even when I forget, even when I am restless, awareness is not gone." Chen touched the soil with his hands. "No way. Forgetting is also reflected within awareness. Striving is reflected within awareness. You cannot leave the moon behind. You cannot lose awareness. Even when you think you are far, you are still held. Perhaps as you listen now, you can feel this truth. Your mind may be busy, filled with ripples of thought, or it may be quiet, reflecting stillness. Either way, awareness remains untouched, shining like the moon in every drop of water. You do not need to fight the ripples. You only need to remember that the moon is always there." Let us pause together. Imagine 1,000 rivers flowing across the earth. In each river, the moon appears shimmering, trembling, sometimes broken by waves, sometimes perfectly still. Yet above the moon remains whole. So too, in every thought, in every feeling, awareness shines. It cannot be lost. It cannot be broken. The abbot, who had listened quietly to Wei's discovery, reflected deeply on these words. For decades he had believed that his mind needed to be perfectly still to see truth. He had feared his distractions, scolded himself for wandering, forced silence through sheer will. Now he saw that even in his restlessness, awareness had been present, shining all along. His striving had only stirred the water, but the moon had never disappeared. That evening he shared this with the community. The monks gathered in the hall, lanterns flickering, their faces calm. The abbot's voice was soft, touched with humility. "Brothers, for years I believed that only when my mind was pure, empty of thought, would I see truth. But now I know awareness is not absent when the water ripples. The moon is always shining, even when its reflection trembles. Do not be afraid of your thoughts. Do not punish yourself for forgetting. All of it is already held within awareness." The monks felt a great sigh of relief move through the hall. They realized they did not need to perfect themselves before they could touch awakening. They only needed to recognize that awakening was already touching them, even in their imperfections. One novice, who often despaired at his wandering mind, whispered, "So even my distraction is not outside the way." Chen, sitting nearby, turned to him with kind eyes. Your distraction is the way. Your restlessness is the way. Your awareness of distraction proves that awareness has never left. Even the ripples are part of the reflection. Perhaps you too can let go of the need to perfect yourself before you rest. Tonight, as thoughts move through your mind, do not struggle against them. Let them ripple. Let them drift. Beneath them, awareness is whole, holding you as the moon holds the rivers. There is a story of a master who said, "When the mind is quiet, I see truth. When the mind is noisy, I see truth." Truth does not depend on stillness or noise. It depends only on awareness. His students puzzled at these words, but in time they understood the moon shines in every bucket whether the water is calm or stirred. Wei, holding the bucket that had shown him the moon, sat long into the evening by the pond. He watched the ripples move across the water, watched the reflection bend and return, and with each breath he felt the truth sink deeper, that he had never been outside awareness, never lost, never separate. As the night deepens around you, let this truth cradle you too. You do not need to erase your ripples. You do not need to silence your mind. Awareness is here, shining like the moon, reflecting in every thought, in every breath, in every moment. Rest in that moonlight. Rest in the knowing that you have never been apart. The monastery settled into a rhythm that was both ordinary and luminous. The monks continued their tasks as before, carrying water, chopping wood, sweeping the courtyards, tending the garden. Yet each act was suffused with a freshness, as though the veil of striving had been lifted, and the simple beauty of life shone unobstructed. The abbot often reflected on how much had changed. Years ago, the meditation hall had been a place of tension. He remembered the rows of monks, sitting stiff-backed, brows furrowed, their minds burning with effort. They had mistaken stillness for stiffness, silence for suppression. Now the hall felt different. When the monks gathered, the air was not heavy but light. Some sat with straight spines, some leaned slightly, some breathed deeply, others softly, but all carried the same ease. Meditation was no longer a punishment or a path of conquest. It was simply resting in what already was. One evening after the meal, a novice approached Chen. He looked uncertain, as if afraid his question might sound foolish. Bowing low, he asked, "Master, how do I know when I am practicing correctly? Sometimes I sit and the mind wanders. Sometimes I work and I forget to be aware. At other times I feel peaceful for a while, then restless again. Am I failing?" Chen's eyes softened. "Tell me, when you are hungry, what do you do?" The novice blinked. "I eat." "And when you are tired?" Chen asked. "I sleep," the novice replied. Chen smiled. "That is the way." The novice tilted his head, puzzled. "But isn't the way supposed to be more profound?" Chen shook his head gently. "What could be more profound than living fully in each moment? When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep. When working, work. When resting, rest. This is awareness. This is the way. You do not need to be extraordinary. You only need to be present." The novice bowed again, feeling tears gather in his eyes. He realized how much of his life had been spent in conflict, eating while thinking of work, working while longing for rest, resting while worrying about tomorrow. Rarely had he allowed himself to be where he was. In Chen's simple words, he glimpsed a freedom he had never known. Perhaps you too have felt this conflict, eating while distracted, resting while anxious, always living halfway between here and somewhere else. But tonight you can let that go. Be where you are. If you are resting, then rest. If you are breathing, then breathe. Nothing more is required. Awareness is already here. Let us pause together. Imagine sitting at a table with a bowl of warm rice before you. Steam rises gently, the fragrance fills the air. You lift a spoonful to your lips, tasting its simple sweetness. You are not thinking of tomorrow. You are not chasing peace. You are simply eating. In that moment, nothing is missing. This is the way. Wei, hearing Chen's teaching, smiled to himself. He remembered all the years he had sat in meditation, fighting his thoughts, scolding himself for distraction. Now he saw how unnecessary it had been. Awareness did not mean forcing the mind into silence. It meant living fully, even in the most ordinary acts. Later, as he walked through the bamboo grove, Wei whispered, "When walking, walk." The sound of his sandals on the stone path became music. The rustle of bamboo leaves became a prayer. Each step was complete. He no longer longed for some future awakening. Each step was the awakening itself. The abbot too took comfort in these words. He often repeated them to himself when he lay down at night. For years he had tried to force his body to endure long hours of sitting, pushing through pain, believing rest was weakness. Now, as he lay upon his mat, he whispered, "When tired, sleep." And for the first time in decades, he allowed himself to rest fully without guilt. Perhaps you too can rest fully tonight. Let go of the idea that you must fix your mind before sleep, that you must erase every thought, that you must earn rest. You are tired, so sleep. You are breathing, so breathe. This is the way. There is a story of a master who was asked, "What is Zen?" He replied, "When walking, walk. When eating, eat. When sleeping, sleep." His students laughed, thinking it too simple. But later, as they lived their lives, they realized how rarely they actually did those things. They walked while thinking of the past, ate while worrying about the future, slept while clinging to regret. The master's words were not simple at all. They were the deepest teaching. The monks of the monastery began to embody this in their daily life. The kitchen hummed with presents as rice was cooked and bowls washed. The garden bloomed under careful hands that no longer rushed. The halls echoed with laughter, not because enlightenment had made them aloof, but because they had learned to be fully human, to eat when eating, to sleep when sleeping, to live when living. As night deepened, the monastery grew quiet. Lanterns glowed softly along the pathways, the bamboo swayed in the wind, and the pond reflected the silver of the moon. Each monk lay upon his mat, breathing gently, the teachings of the day settling into his heart. And as you lie here now, you too can let the simplicity guide you. You do not need to chase tomorrow. You do not need to perfect tonight. Be here. Rest in your body. Rest in your breath. Let your awareness hold you as it always has. When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep. When resting, rest. This is the way. The days in the monastery continued to unfold like a steady song, each note simple, each note complete. There were no great ceremonies, no thunderous revelations, only the quiet rhythm of daily life. And yet within that rhythm, the monks discovered what they had been searching for all along. They found that awakening was not in the extraordinary, but in the ordinariness of just this. One morning, as mist clung to the bamboo leaves and dew sparkled on spider webs, a novice asked Chen, "Master, when will I experience true awakening? I keep waiting for something magnificent, some vision, some light that will change everything." Chen lifted his broom, sweeping leaves from the path. He did not look up, did not pause, but said softly, "This." The novice frowned. "This, you mean sweeping leaves?" Chen nodded. "Yes, this. When sweeping, sweep. When walking, walk. When eating, eat. Awakening is not something to wait for. It is in the act itself, here and now." The novice lowered his gaze, uncertain. He wanted to believe, but his mind still longed for fireworks, for extraordinary signs. Later, as he swept alone, he whispered to himself, "This." The sound of the broom against stone filled his ears. The rustle of leaves moved with the wind, and for a moment he felt a stillness he had never noticed. Perhaps it was true, awakening was not far away. It was here, in the sweep of the broom, in the breath moving in his chest, in the ordinariness of just this. Perhaps you too have waited for something extraordinary, a perfect moment, a grand revelation, a final arrival. But as you lie here, notice the ordinariness of your breath, the way your body sinks into rest, the way awareness holds it all. This is enough. This is awakening. Let us pause together. Imagine yourself sweeping a courtyard at dawn. The air is cool, the stones damp with dew. With each stroke of the broom, leaves scatter and settle again. The sound is soft, rhythmic, steady. There is no rush, no goal, no expectation, only this moment complete in itself. You feel the broom in your hands, the earth beneath your feet, the breath in your body. Just this, you whisper. And in that whisper you realize nothing is missing. The kitchen too became a place of awakening. Monks who once saw cooking as a duty began to approach it as practice. When chopping vegetables, they noticed the crisp sound of the knife, the fragrance released with each cut. When stirring pots of rice, they felt the rhythm of the ladle, the rising steam warming their faces. They no longer thought of enlightenment as a distant peak. They tasted it in each grain, in each sip of broth, in each act of nourishment. One evening, as rain began to fall, the monks gathered in the hall. The drops tapped gently against the roof, their rhythm filling the silence. The sound of rain had always been there. Yet tonight it seemed different, fuller, deeper, alive. The abbot listened and smiled. "Do you hear it?" he asked softly. "This is the teaching. This is the way. Not hidden, not distant. Just this, the sound of rain." The monks closed their eyes, breathing with the rhythm of the falling water. For years they had searched for wisdom in sutras and sermons. Now they found it in the simplest sound, a sound that had been with them all along. Perhaps you can hear this too even now. Imagine the sound of rain falling softly, steady and unhurried. Each drop is complete, each drop alive. You do not need to explain it. You do not need to capture it. Simply listen. Just this, the rain, the breath, the awareness. Nothing more is needed. Wei, who had long carried the burden of striving, found these teachings sinking deeper into him each day. He no longer scolded himself for distraction. When his mind wandered, he whispered, "Just this," and returned to whatever was before him. When he ate, he ate. When he walked, he walked. When he rested, he rested. And slowly the restless tide within him began to calm. He told Chen one evening, "Brother, I used to think I would know awakening by its brightness, by some great clarity that would change me forever. Now I see it is quieter than I imagined. It is in sweeping, in eating, in listening to the rain. It is not that life has changed. It is that I have finally stopped looking away from it." Chen smiled. "Yes, Wei. Awakening is not about adding something new. It is about recognizing what has always been here. The ordinary is extraordinary when fully seen. This is the secret that is no secret at all. Perhaps you too can allow this to settle in your heart. Do not wait for tomorrow to bring peace. Do not demand fireworks from the sky. Rest in what is here. The weight of your body, the rhythm of your breath, the awareness, holding it all, just this. There is a saying, in Zen, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The monks now understood it fully. Nothing changed, and yet everything changed. The tasks were the same, but the way they were lived was different. They no longer longed for another world. They lived this one fully, and in that fullness they discovered awakening. As night deepened and lanterns glowed along the pathways, the monks lay upon their mats. Some drifted to sleep quickly, Others listened to the rain as it continued to fall. But all of them felt a peace that was not forced, not earned, not distant. It was simply the peace of being here now with just this. And as you close your eyes tonight, you too can rest in that truth. You do not need to chase peace into the future. You do not need to grasp at awakening as if it were hidden. The ordinariness of this moment is already extraordinary. The breath, the body, the awareness, just this. Rest in it. Rest deeply. As the seasons turned and the monastery's gardens bloomed with new harvests, word spread even further of the monk who refused to meditate, yet whose presence seemed to shine like a steady flame. Pilgrims came not only from neighboring villages, but from distant provinces, some traveling for weeks over mountains and rivers. They came with weary feet and hopeful eyes, each believing that Chen carried a final secret, a hidden treasure that would complete their search once and for all. One autumn morning, a group of seekers gathered in the courtyard. The air was crisp, the scent of pine sharp and clear leaves drifting lazily from the trees. The abbot invited Chen to meet them, for he sensed that what they sought could not be found in sermons, but only in presence. When Chen appeared, the seekers bowed deeply, then one of them stepped forward. He was a scholar, his robe immaculate, his expression grave. "Master Chen," he said, "we have read countless teachings, practiced countless techniques, and traveled far. Yet still we feel unsatisfied. Please tell us what is the final secret of enlightenment." Chen was silent for a long time. He looked up at the sky, vast and cloudless above them. At last, he asked softly, "Tell me, upon what does the sky rest?" The scholar frowned. "The sky does not rest on anything, and yet it holds the sun, the moon, the stars, the clouds, the wind, the rain." Chen continued, "It carries them all, and still it is never burdened. Awareness is the same. It does not rest on anything. It needs no support. It holds everything without effort, without strain. That is the final secret you are searching for." The courtyard fell silent. The seekers looked up at the sky as if seeing it for the first time. Some felt awe, others confusion, but all sensed a weight lift from their hearts. Perhaps as you hear this, you can feel the same truth. Awareness, like the sky, does not need your effort to hold it together. It is already vast, already unburdened, already free. Your thoughts, your feelings, your breath, they pass through it like clouds, yet awareness itself remains open, untouched. Let us pause together. Imagine lying beneath a wide, endless sky. Clouds drift, the sun rises, the stars sparkle, the wind moves. The sky holds it all, yet is never strained, never heavy. In the same way, awareness holds all that you are. Your thoughts, your worries, your dreams, without effort. You do not need to support awareness, it supports you. One of the seekers whispered almost to himself. So, there is no final secret. It was only the sky always above us. Chen smiled gently. Yes. You asked for the final secret, but it is not hidden. It is not something to find, not something to earn. It is here, as ordinary as the sky. The question is not what the secret island. The question is why you continue to pretend you do not see it. The abbot standing nearby felt the depth of these words. For so long he too had searched for a final breakthrough, a single moment that would crown his years of discipline. But now, watching the seekers stare at the sky, he realized that enlightenment was not an event to be achieved, but a recognition of what had never been absent. Wei, who listened with the other monks, whispered under his breath, "The sky needs no support. Awareness needs no support. Then all this time I have been trying to hold what was already holding me." Tears blurred his vision as he looked upward. He felt the weight of decades lift, not because he had solved a riddle, but because he had stopped asking the question. Perhaps you too have carried the weight of holding your life together, striving to fix, to control, to perfect. But tonight let yourself rest in the sky of awareness. You do not need to carry awareness. Awareness carries you. You do not need to hold it all together. The sky has always held you. The seekers lingered in the courtyard, long after Chen's words, some lying back upon the stones to gaze upward, others closing their eyes, feeling the vastness within themselves. They realized they had come searching for a treasure, only to discover they had been walking within it all along. There is a story of a man who dreamed he was a beggar wandering in poverty. In his dream he searched everywhere for coins, for food, for shelter. Finally he awoke and found himself in his own home, his own bed, surrounded by everything he needed. Enlightenment, Chen taught, is the same. We search in dreams, unaware that we are already home. That evening, the abbot addressed the monks and visitors together. His voice was soft, carrying the humility of a man who had laid down his burdens. For many years I believed I had to climb toward enlightenment, that one day I would reach a peak and find the final secret waiting. But now I see there is no peak, no final prize. There is only this sky, vast and endless, holding all that island. When you recognize this, you stop climbing and start resting. The hall grew still, each person breathing gently, the truth settling into their hearts. They realized that the final secret was no secret at all. It was the openness of awareness itself, needing no support, hiding in plain sight. As night fell, lanterns flickered in the courtyard, and the stars spread across the heavens. The monks and visitors walked slowly beneath the sky, each step lighter than before. They no longer searched for what was missing. They lived within what had always been present. And, as you lie here now, you too can let go of the search for a final answer. You do not need to chase another method, another solution, another tomorrow. Rest in the sky of awareness that has always been with you, vast and unshaken, holding every breath, every thought, every dream. Close your eyes more deeply. Feel the weight of the day settle into the earth. Let your breath move like clouds across the sky. You are already held. You are already home. The sky needs no support. Awareness needs no support. Rest in that truth. Rest as the sky rests, vast, open, infinite. The monastery was quiet beneath the autumn moon. Lanterns glowed softly along the stone paths, and the sound of wind stirred the bamboo into a hushed chorus. The visitors who had once pressed Chen for a final secret now lingered with softer eyes. They no longer demanded answers, for they had come to see that answers were not hidden in riddles, but in the very awareness with which they asked the questions. One evening, as the monks and seekers gathered in the hall, the abbot turned to Chen and said, "Brother, all these people have come so far, carrying the burden of their striving. Perhaps tonight you can offer them one last word, not as a secret, but as a reminder." Chen nodded, his expression serene. He looked around at the circle of faces, young and old, weary and hopeful, restless and still. He saw himself reflected in each of them, for he too had once been a seeker, burdened by effort, blinded by striving. He rose slowly, his robe falling gently around him, and spoke in a voice that was calm, steady, and clear. "You have come searching for awakening," he said. "You have sought it in books, in techniques, in journeys across mountains. You have chased it like a shadow, thinking it was always just beyond your reach. But hear this, you are already awake. You have always been awake. The awareness that hears these words is the very enlightenment you seek. You cannot become it, for you already are it." The hall grew silent, his words hanging in the air, like the sound of a bell after it is struck. Some monks bowed their heads, tears spilling onto their robes. Others closed their eyes, letting the truth sink deeper than thought. The visitors too felt something stir within them, not an excitement but a stillness, as if a weight they had carried for years had quietly dissolved. Chen continued, "Do not mistake me. Practice has its place. Sitting, chanting, working, bowing, these are fingers pointing to the moon. Use them if they remind you, let them fall away if they bind you. But whether you practice or not, whether you sit or stand, eat or sleep, the truth remains, you are already what you seek." Perhaps you too can feel this as you listen. Notice the awareness that holds these words. Notice that it does not need to be improved, does not need to be polished, does not need to be fixed. It has always been here, awake, clear, spacious. This is what you are. Let us pause together. Imagine sitting beneath the night sky, the stars spread wide above you. For years you have searched for a single star, certain that it holds the secret of peace. But then you realize it is not a single star you need, but the vastness of the sky itself. The sky has always been there, holding you, even when you were too busy searching to notice. In this moment you see it. You rest. You are home. Wei, who had walked beside Chen for so long, felt the words pierce his heart like lightning and soothe him like rain. He whispered, "So all along my striving, my failures, my questions, they were never outside awareness." Chen looked at him with compassion. "No way. Even your striving was part of awakening. Even your forgetting was held by awareness. You never left. You only pretended you had." The abbot too felt the weight of his decades dissolve. He bowed deeply to Chen and said, "I taught discipline, I taught effort, and yet I see now that the greatest discipline is to stop pretending. Thank you for showing me what was always here." Chen shook his head. "I have shown you nothing. I have only reminded you to look at what you already are." The monks and visitors sat in silence for a long time. No one needed to speak, for the truth was not in words, but in the stillness that filled the hall, in the awareness that each of them carried, in the peace that required no explanation. Perhaps as you rest tonight, you too can let go of the pretending. Stop chasing after tomorrow. Stop scolding yourself for yesterday. Stop demanding that you become something else. Awareness is here, awake, holding you. You are already what you seek. Close your eyes more deeply. Feel the weight of the body sinking into the bed. Feel the breath rising and falling, effortless, steady. Notice the awareness that holds it all. This is awakening. This is enlightenment. This is you. The monastery in the days that followed did not change in outward form. The monks still swept the courtyards, still tended, the gardens still rang the bells. But within, everything was transformed. No longer was practice a path of struggle. It was an expression of what had always been true. No longer did seekers arrive demanding secrets. They arrived, rested, and left lighter, reminded of the truth they had carried all along. And Chen. He continued his life as before, working in the garden, sweeping leaves, drinking tea. He never declared himself a master, never claimed special status. But his presence, simple and ordinary, remained a teaching more powerful than any sutra. For those who asked for his final word, he always said the same: "You are already awake." The only choice is whether you recognize it or keep pretending you are not. And with those words, the journey was complete, not because something had been gained, but because it was finally seen that nothing had ever been missing. As you drift into rest tonight, let these words be your pillow. You are already awake. You have always been awake. Rest not in striving, not in seeking, but in the awareness that has held you all along. Breathe gently. Let the body soften. Let the mind quieten like a lake when the wind stops. The moon is reflected. The sky is vast. Awareness is here. You are home.